The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender from the sachet Margaret had tucked into her pillowcase. The late afternoon light slipped through the blinds in thin strips, painting stripes across the linoleum floor. I sat beside the bed, my hands folded loosely in my lap, watching the rise and fall of her chest. She was 72, her frame thin as the pages of an old hymn book, but her eyes were still sharp, still aware of the room, of me. Her 61-year-old husband, William, she whispered, her voice a thin thread that seemed to pull at the silk of the blanket. Come closer. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the rail of the bed. Her hand was cool, the skin papery where it met mine. I turned my palm upward and let her fingers lace through mine. The pressure was light, but it anchored me. I'm here, I said, my voice low, the words feeling too large for the quiet space. I'm right here. She smiled, a faint lift at the corner of her mouth that did not reach her eyes fully, but it was there. You always were the steady one, she said. Even when I was scrambling to keep the house warm after the furnace broke, you were the one who found the number for the repairman and sat with me until it was fixed. I swallowed, feeling the familiar weight of gratitude and something else, a quiet dread that settled low in my stomach. You kept us going, Margaret. You always did. Her gaze drifted to the window, where a sparrow hopped along the sill, pecking at a crumb someone had left. I've been thinking about the boys, she said, her tone soft but edged with something I could not name. Joshua and Emily. They've been busy. I nodded, though I could not see the motion of her head. They've been busy with their own lives. She turned her head back to me, her eyes searching mine as if she could read the thoughts I kept locked behind my teeth. They come when they need something. A loan, a question about the trust, a reminder that the mortgage is due. They stay for tea. They smile. They ask how I am. And then they leave. It's like they're checking a box. I felt a pang, sharp and sudden, but I kept my face calm. They love you, Margaret. They show it in their own way. She let out a breath that sounded almost like a sigh. Love is not just in the words, William. It's in the staying. It's in the soup when you're sick. The hand that holds yours when the night is long. I see them scrolling on their phones while I talk. I hear the click of the shutter as they take another picture for their feeds. I hear the laughter that follows a comment about a cruise, a new bag, a weekend away. I hear the silence that follows when I ask about the will. Her voice dropped, and I felt the weight of her words settle like dust on the windowsill. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to be the reason they feel guilty. I want you to be free. I squeezed her hand gently, feeling the faint tremor in her fingers. You are not a burden. You are my wife, my partner, my love. She managed a faint smile. Promise me something, William. When I'm gone, promise you will not let them waste your life. Promise you will sell the house. Promise you will live for yourself. My throat tightened. I wanted to protest, to say that the house was more than bricks and mortar, that it held our wedding photos, the marks on the doorframe where we measured Joshua's height, the scar on the kitchen tile where Margaret dropped the hot pan and laughed. But I saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her breathing had become a little shallower, and I knew arguing would only steal the little strength she had left. I promise, I said, each word deliberate, as if I were laying a stone in a foundation. I will sell the house. I will live the rest of my days on my own terms. She nodded, a small movement that seemed to cost her effort. Good. Now, there is something I need you to see. She lifted her free hand, weak but purposeful, and pointed toward the door that led to the small study off the hall. In the desk drawer, there is a tablet. I recorded something for you. I want you to watch it when you feel ready. Not now. Not yet. When the house is quiet and you are alone. I looked at the door, then back at her face, the lines around her mouth deepening as she fought to stay conscious. I will. She closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, there was a fierce clarity that surprised me. William, you have always been the steady rock. I need you to remember that you deserve peace. You deserve a morning where you wake up, and the only thing you have to decide is what to have for breakfast. You deserve evenings, where you sit on the porch and watch the sunset, without worrying about who will call next for money. I felt a lump rise, but I swallowed it down. I will remember that. She squeezed my hand once more, then let go. Her eyes drifted to the ceiling, and her breathing grew softer, each inhalation a little shallower than the last. I stayed still, not wanting to break the fragile quiet, not wanting to rush the moment that was slipping away like sand through fingers. The monitor beside the bed gave a soft, steady beep, a metronome marking the seconds. I watched the rise and fall of her chest, the way her lips moved slightly, as if she were forming words she would never speak aloud. I thought of the garden we planted together, the roses she pruned every spring, the way she would hum old hymns while she kneaded bread. I thought of the countless mornings we had shared coffee at the kitchen table, the newspaper spread between us, the quiet companionship that needed no words. Her breath hitched once, then steadied. Her eyelids fluttered, and for a heartbeat I thought she might open them again, might say something else, might reach for me one last time, but the stillness settled, deep and final. The monitor's tone changed, a single long tone that filled the room and then faded into silence. I leaned forward, pressing my forehead to the cool metal of the rail, and let the tears come, quiet and hot, tracing paths down my cheeks. I did not wail. I did not cry out. I simply let the grief flow, a river that had been held back for too long. When I finally lifted my head, the room felt emptier, the air heavier. I looked to the empty chair beside the bed, the one where I had sat for hours, holding her hand, listening to her breath. The chair was empty, but the imprint of her presence lingered like a scent on fabric. I reached for the tablet on the nightstand, the one she had mentioned. I turned it on, the screen lighting up with a soft glow. I hesitated, then pressed play. Her face appeared, framed by the soft light of the study window. She looked younger there, her hair pinned back, her eyes bright. She spoke directly to the lens, her voice steady, filled with a love that was both tender and fierce. William, she began, if you are watching this, it means I am gone. I want you to know that I loved every moment we shared. I want you to know that you deserve a life that is yours alone. Do not let them take that from you. Sell the house. Live freely. I have made sure you will be provided for. You deserve peace. The video ended, leaving the room in silence once more. I sat back, the weight of her words settling on my shoulders like a warm blanket. I looked at the empty chair again, feeling the echo of her presence, and whispered, voice barely audible, I will, my love. I will. The promise hung in the air, a quiet vow that felt both a burden and a release. I did not know what the next days would bring, but I knew I would honor her wish, not out of duty alone, but because the love she gave me deserved nothing less than a life lived on my own terms. I'm sorry for your loss, the nurse said softly. William nodded, his eyes fixed on the polished wood of the coffin before him. The chapel was hushed, the only sound the occasional rustle of a program being turned. A single white rose lay atop the casket, its petals fresh against the dark fabric. He sat in the front row, the aisle empty on either side, the family pews behind him vacant, save for a few distant relatives who kept their heads lowered. The minister's voice was low, speaking of love and legacy, but William heard only the echo of his wife's laughter in the garden, the way she would hum while she pruned the roses. A distant aunt leaned over, her voice a whisper that carried like gossip. "Such a shame they couldn't be here," she said, glancing toward the back doors, where the family pew should have been filled. William felt the weight of her pity, but kept his gaze forward, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. He noticed the way her eyes flicked to the empty seats, then quickly away, as if afraid to linger on the absence. The service ended with a soft hymn, the organ notes swelling then fading. Attendees rose, offering quiet condolences as they passed. William remained seated, the rose a small bright spot in his blurred vision. When the last person filed out, an attendant approached, his shoes silent on the carpet. "Mr. Harrington, if you'd like a moment alone, we can close the doors," he said. William stood, his movements deliberate. "Thank you," he replied, his voice even, the words measured. He walked slowly to the casket, placing a palm gently on the cool wood. He lingered, listening to the silence that seemed to press in from all sides. The attendant slipped out, closing the heavy doors with a muted thud. Alone, William reached into his coat pocket for his phone. The screen lit up with a notification from a family friend's social media post. He frowned, tapping to open it. The image showed a sparkling resort pool under a bright sun, a cocktail glass resting on the edge. The caption read, "Soaking up the sun. Wish Margaret was here." He recognized the backdrop instantly. A luxury cruise liner's deck, the railings and the sea beyond unmistakable. A knot formed in his chest, not of sorrow alone but of disbelief. He unlocked his phone and opened the family chat thread. Joshua's message stared back at him, the words bright against the screen. "Mom would have wanted us to relax. Pre-booked this ages ago for her birthday present, but now it's a celebration of life trip for us. She'll understand. $47,000 well spent." Below it, Emily had added a string of champagne emojis, each one a tiny bubble of celebration. William read the words twice, the letters swimming before his eyes. He felt the heat rise in his neck, not anger but a deep, aching betrayal. He looked again at the coffin, the rose, the finality of the scene. The promise he had whispered to Margaret's silent form solidified, no longer a whisper but a firm resolve swelling in his chest. He did not reply to the messages. Instead, he opened a new browser tab, his fingers moving over the keypad with purpose. He typed the phrase slowly, each letter deliberate. "Real estate agent near me." The search bar held the words, the cursor blinking at the end. He pressed enter, the page loading with a list of local offices. The first result was a familiar name, Sarah Jenkins, whose sign he had seen at the town's farmers market weeks ago. He stared at the screen, the numbers and names blurring as the weight of his decision settled. A soft chime sounded from the phone again. Another notification. This time it was a text from an unknown number, a simple thumbs-up emoji. William ignored it, his focus on the list of agents. He scrolled down, noting the phone numbers, the addresses, the brief descriptions. He chose the one closest to the cemetery, the one with the earliest available appointment. He stood, smoothing his coat, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The chapel lights were dimmed for the next service, the stained glass casting muted colors across the empty pews. William walked down the aisle, his steps echoing softly. He paused at the doors, looking back one last time at the coffin, the rose, the empty space where his children should have been. He exhaled, a breath that seemed to carry both grief and determination. Outside, the air was cool, the sky a pale gray that promised rain. He walked to his car, the keys cool in his hand. As he drove away from the funeral home, the city streets blurred past, familiar landmarks passing without notice. His mind replayed the cruise photo, the caption, the emojis, the utter disregard for the solemnity of the day. He felt no urge to call them, no desire to argue. Instead, he felt a quiet certainty forming, like a stone settling at the bottom of a pond. He arrived at Sarah Jenkins' modest office a short while later. The building was brick, a small sign swaying gently in the breeze. He entered, the bell above the door jingling softly. Sarah looked up from her desk, her expression professional, her eyes kind behind her glasses. "Mr. Harrington, please come in," she said. Gesturing to a chair opposite her desk, William sat, his hands resting on his knees. "I wish to sell the house," he said, his voice calm, the words plain. "Margaret's final wish was that I do so. I would like to proceed discreetly and swiftly." Sarah nodded, her pen poised over a notepad. "Of course. I understand this is difficult. May I ask if the property is held solely in your name?" she asked. "It is," William replied. "It was placed in a revocable trust for my benefit before her passing." Sarah made a note, then asked, "Have you spoken with your children about this?" Her tone was neutral, neither pushing nor prying. William shook his head. "They are unaware. I learned of their absence through a social media post after the service." He paused, choosing his words carefully. The post showed them on a cruise, celebrating while the service was underway. Sarah's eyebrows lifted slightly, but she kept her composure. "I see. In that case, we can move forward without involving them unless legal matters require it." She tapped her pen. "I will prepare the listing, arrange for photographs, and set a showing schedule that respects your privacy." William felt a flicker of relief, a sense that the first step had been taken. "Thank you," he said. "I would like the process to be as smooth as possible." Sarah smiled gently. "We will handle everything with care. You focus on what you need right now." He stood, thanked her again, and left the office. The walk back to his car felt lighter, as if some of the burden had shifted onto the path ahead. He paused at the driver's seat, looking out at the quiet street. The promise he had made to Margaret was no longer a solitary thought. It was an action set in motion. He started the engine, the car humming softly as he pulled onto the road. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the pavement. In the rearview mirror, he caught a glimpse of the funeral home's spire fading into the distance. He did not look back for long. His eyes stayed on the road ahead, on the next turn, on the next decision that would honor the promise he had made. I tapped the pen against the notepad, waiting for Mr. Harrington to arrive. The bell above the door jingled, and he stepped inside, his coat damp from the drizzle outside. He paused, glanced around, then moved to the chair opposite my desk. I gestured to the seat, and he settled, his hands resting calmly on his knees. "I wish to sell the house," he said, his voice low and steady. "Margaret's last desire was that I act accordingly. I wish to move forward quietly and quickly." I nodded, my pen poised. "Of course. I understand this is difficult. Might I inquire whether the estate is registered only under your name?" "It is," he replied. "It had been put into a revocable trust for my advantage prior to her death." I made a brief note. "Have you spoken with your children about this?" He shook his head. "They are unaware. I found out they were missing from a social media update after the ceremony." He chose his words carefully. The post depicted them on a ship voyage, festivities occurring as the service proceeded. My eyebrows lifted slightly, but I kept my composure. "In that case, we can move forward without involving them, unless legal matters require it." I tapped the pen. "I will get the listing ready, organize the photos, and plan a viewing timetable that honors your privacy." He felt a flicker of relief, a sense that the first step had been taken. "Thank you," he said. "I hope the procedure can go as smoothly as it can." I smiled gently. "We will handle everything with care. You focus on what you need right now." He stood, thanked me again, and left the office. The return stroll to his vehicle seemed less heavy, like part of the weight had moved forward onto the road. He stopped at the driver's seat, gazing out onto the silent street. The vow he gave Margaret stopped being just an idea. It became a deed already underway. He ignited the engine. the car murmuring gently as he drove onto the road. The sun started to sink, throwing long shadows across the pavement. In the rearview mirror, he spotted the funeral home's tip disappearing far away. He glanced back only briefly. His gaze remained on the road ahead, the upcoming turn, the forthcoming choice that would fulfill his pledge. Later that afternoon, the office phone rang. I answered, recognizing the number as William's. He sounded calm, his tone measured. "I have gathered the trust papers," he said. "May I bring them by for you to review?" "Of course," I replied. "Come whenever you are ready." He arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a leather-bound folder. He placed it on the desk and opened it, revealing a neatly stapled set of pages. "This is the revocable trust agreement," he explained, pointing to the first page. "It names me as the sole beneficiary and grants me full authority over the property." I leaned forward, scanning the text. The language was clear, the signatures dated months before Margaret's passing. I noted the clause that allowed the trustee to sell the asset without beneficiary consent. "It looks solid," I said. "The trust gives you the power to list the house whenever you choose." He closed the folder, his expression thoughtful. "There is more I need to confirm." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small notebook. "I have been tracking the household expenses for the past 12 years. I blinked, surprised by the detail. "May I see it?" He slid the notebook across the desk. The pages were filled with columns of numbers and brief descriptions. Property tax payments, insurance premiums, roof repairs, furnace replacements, monthly checks sent to Joshua and Emily, grocery receipts labeled family support. I ran a finger down a column that totaled over $180,000, written out in words, not digits. "He has been covering everything," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "Taxes, repairs, and direct payments to the children." William watched my reaction, his jaw tight but his voice even. "Those numbers represent what Margaret and I provided. They were gifts, not loans. There was never an expectation of repayment." I looked up, meeting his gaze. "If the trust holds the title, the children have no legal claim." He nodded. "I contacted my attorney this morning to verify that point." I felt a spark of curiosity. "What did he say?" William smiled faintly. "He confirmed that the house belongs solely to the trust and that any financial assistance we gave was a outright gift. He also said the children would need to prove undue influence or lack of capacity to contest the will, which is unlikely given Margaret's clear video message." I felt a tension rise, not from anger but from the weight of what those numbers meant. I wondered what else lay hidden in those old files. He closed the notebook and stood. "I would like to move forward with the listing this week. Can we schedule photos for Thursday?" I checked my calendar. "Thursday morning works. I will bring a photographer who knows how to capture a home's warmth without invading privacy." He thanked me, his voice soft. "Thank you for handling this with discretion." I walked him to the door, watching as he stepped onto the sidewalk and hailed a cab. The cab pulled away, leaving a faint trace of exhaust in the air. I turned back to the desk, the trust document still open, and thought about the quiet determination that had brought him here. Later that day, I called the photographer to confirm the time. While we spoke, I glanced at the framed picture on the wall, a shot of a colonial-style house with a wide porch, the very property we were about to list. I imagined the rooms filled with laughter, the scent of fresh paint, the sound of a piano drifting from the parlor. I pushed the thought aside. My job was to present the house as it stood now, not as it had been. The next morning, I arrived at the Harrington residence with my camera crew. The front yard was neat. The rosebush Margaret had tended blooming in pale pink. I knocked, and William opened the door, his expression reserved but welcoming. "Please come in," he said, gesturing toward the foyer. We stepped inside, and I felt the coolness of the marble floor under my shoes. The foyer displayed a console table with a single vase holding a few cut flowers. William led us to the living room, where sunlight filtered through sheer curtains, casting a soft glow on a sofa that looked untouched for weeks. I raised my camera, capturing the way the light played on the worn armchair, the faint indentations on the cushions where someone had sat for hours. William stood nearby, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes scanning the room as if seeing it for the first time in years. "We can start here," I said, my voice steady. "Let's get a few wide shots, then move to the kitchen." He nodded, and we began. The photographer adjusted the lens, and I whispered directions, noting the angles that would highlight the house's strengths. The built-in bookshelves, the stone fireplace, the wide plank flooring that ran from the hall to the dining area. As we moved through the house, William paused at the bottom of the staircase. He placed a hand on the newel post, his fingers tracing the smooth wood. I saw a flicker of something, perhaps memory, perhaps resolve, cross his face before he turned and continued upward. In the master bedroom, the closet doors stood open, revealing rows of neatly folded shirts and suits. William opened a drawer, pulled out a folded letter, and held it for a moment, before placing it gently back. I did not ask what it contained. I respected his privacy. We finished in the kitchen, where the stainless steel appliances gleamed under the recessed lights. I took a shot of the center island, the marble countertop reflecting the soft glow of a pendant lamp. William leaned against the doorway, watching us work. When the session ended, I packed my equipment and thanked him for his cooperation. He walked me to the door, his steps quiet on the hardwood. "I appreciate your professionalism," he said. "It means a great deal to me." I smiled. "It is my pleasure. I will have the proofs ready for your review by Friday." He nodded, and I stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. The morning sun felt warmer now, the breeze carrying the faint scent of blooming magnolias from the neighbor's yard. I walked to my car, thoughts turning to the next steps, drafting the listing copy, setting the price, and preparing for the first showing. Later that afternoon, I sat at my desk, the proofs spread before me. The words I had chosen aimed to convey charm and possibility without exaggeration. A welcoming family home with 4 bedrooms, a sunlit kitchen, and a mature garden that offers privacy and peace. I read them aloud, feeling the rhythm of each phrase, making sure there were no abrupt stops that would jar a listener's ear. I paused, thinking about the conversation I had just had with William's attorney. He had reiterated that the trust held clear title, that the children's potential claims lacked foundation, and that the video message Margaret left reinforced William's right to act according to her wishes. I noted the attorney's comment that any attempt to contest would likely fail due to the lack of evidence of undue influence. A soft chime announced an incoming email. I opened it to find a message from the lawyer, attaching a short statement for my records. "Is greater than, to whom it may concern. The Harrington residence located at address is held exclusively in the revocable trust for the benefit of William Harrington. The trust grants him full authority to manage, lease, or sell the property. Any financial support provided to Joshua and Emily Harrington over the past 12 years was characterized as a gift, with no expectation of repayment. Sincerely, Thomas Green, Attorney at Law." I saved the attachment, feeling a sense of closure settle over the paperwork. The legal groundwork was firm, the listing ready, and the path forward clear. I leaned back in my chair, the office quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past, its engine fading into the distance. I glanced at the clock, noting that the day was slipping toward evening, and I felt ready to move to the next phase. Before I left, I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. I wrote a quick reminder to myself. Confirm the showing schedule with William. Double-check the property tax records, and ensure the photographer's release forms are signed. I folded the note and placed it beside the trust document, the 2 papers lying side by side like a promise and its proof. I stood, gathered my belongings, and switched off the lamp. The office plunged into soft darkness, save for the glow of the streetlights filtering through the blinds. I walked to the door, paused with my hand on the knob, and thought about the quiet determination that had guided William's steps thus far. I turned the knob, stepped into the hallway, and heard the distant sound of a door closing somewhere down the corridor. Perhaps another client leaving. Perhaps the building itself settling for the night. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin, and walked toward my car, the city lights beginning to flicker on like distant stars. Sunlight sparkled across the ocean as the cruise ship cut through the waves. A gentle breeze lifted the edge of Joshua's linen shirt as he leaned on the rail. A crystal glass of champagne caught in his fingertips. Emily stood beside him, her phone held high, capturing the endless blue for her followers. The hum of the ship's engines blended with distant laughter and the occasional cry of a gull circling above the deck. "Can you believe this?" Emily said, her voice bright with the lilt she used when speaking to her audience. "Mom would have totally wanted us to enjoy life. This cruise is basically her blessing." Joshua took a sip, the bubbles tickling his nose. "Yeah, it's insane. We booked this ages ago for her birthday, but now it's a celebration of life. She'd be laughing at us right now. I swear." He glanced at his sister, noting the way her eyes sparkled, not just from the sun, but from the thrill of being seen. Emily laughed, a sound that seemed to rise and fall like a wave. "Look at the comments already. People are loving the vibe. I just posted a story of us toasting, and the views are insane. My engagement is going through the roof." A nearby couple turned their heads, smiling at the pair's enthusiasm. A waiter in a crisp white shirt approached, holding a tray of fresh fruit skewers. "Would you like another round, sir?" the waiter asked, his tone polite and unhurried. Joshua smiled, setting his glass down. "Sure, another champagne, please. And maybe a couple more of those skewers." The waiter nodded and moved away. Emily lowered her phone, her expression shifting to something more thoughtful for a brief moment before the smile returned. "Did you see Mom's latest post? She shared that old photo of us at the beach when we were kids. She looked so happy," Emily said, scrolling quickly. Joshua nodded, his gaze drifting to the horizon where the sea met the sky in a thin line of gold. "She always knew how to make a moment feel special. I guess she wanted us to remember that even when things get heavy." Emily's thumb hovered over the screen as she typed a comment. "She would want us to live big, right? No regrets." Joshua chuckled, a low sound that seemed to vibrate in his chest. "Yeah, live big. That's what she'd say. Though I wonder if she'd think we're taking it a bit too literally." Emily glanced at him, her eyebrows lifting. "What do you mean?" He gestured toward the busy deck where passengers mingled, some in elegant evening wear, others in casual swimwear. "We're out here spending a fortune while Dad's probably sitting alone at home, dealing with all the stuff we left behind. I mean, we promised we'd help out more after Mom got sick, but we've been distracted." Emily's smile faltered for a heartbeat. "We did send money when they asked, and we visited when we could. It's not like we abandoned them." Joshua turned his head, his voice dropping slightly. "We sent money, sure, but we weren't there for the day-to-day. Mom's last weeks were spent in that hospital room, and we were off planning this trip. Dad told me he felt alone." Emily's eyes softened. Then she shrugged, the motion almost dismissive. "Mom would have wanted us to be happy. She always said life's too short to dwell on the sad stuff." A burst of laughter erupted from a nearby group playing a trivia game. Joshua forced a grin, raising his glass again. "To Mom, then. May she rest in peace." Emily clinked her glass against his, the sound bright and clear. "To Mom, and to us, for making the most of every moment." The waiter returned with 2 fresh glasses of champagne and a small plate of fruit. He placed them on the rail with a quiet clink. "Thank you," Joshua said, taking a sip. The liquid was cool, sweet. A little too sweet, perhaps, but it felt like a celebration. Emily leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Did you see the comment from Aunt Linda? She said she's thinking of us during this difficult time. I replied that we're making the best of it, and that Mom would have wanted us to enjoy life. Joshua nodded, his eyes scanning the endless water. She's sweet. I just hope Dad knows we're not trying to hurt him. We're just trying to live. A sudden gust of wind sent a spray of sea mist across their faces. Emily laughed, wiping a droplet from her cheek. Hey, look, dolphins! Joshua turned, his gaze catching a sleek arc of gray breaking the surface not far from the ship's bow. A pair of dolphins leapt in tandem, their bodies glinting in the sun. Wow! Emily breathed, her voice hushed with awe. That's amazing. Joshua felt a flicker of something deeper than the surface excitement, a quiet acknowledgement that life kept moving, whether they were ready or not. He squeezed Emily's shoulder gently. Let's enjoy this while we can, he said, his tone softer than before. But let's not forget where we came from. Emily nodded, her smile returning, brighter now, as if the dolphin sighting had reset her mood. Definitely. We'll make Mom proud by living our best lives. The ship's horn sounded a low, resonant note, signaling the start of the afternoon's entertainment. Passengers began to drift toward the pool deck, where a live band was setting up. Joshua and Emily followed the crowd, their steps light, their laughter mingling with the music that began to swell. Later, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they found a quiet corner near the aft rail. The crowd had thinned, leaving them with a sense of intimacy, despite the vastness of the ship. Emily pulled her phone again, this time scrolling through the day's photos. She stopped on a selfie where they both wore oversized sunglasses, their smiles wide, the ocean a blur behind them. This is going to be my next post, she announced, tapping the screen. Caption: Chasing sunsets with my favorite person. Life is a voyage and we're sailing it together. Joshua watched her type, a small smile playing on his lips. Make sure you tag Mom's memory too. She'd like that. Emily glanced at him, her eyes softening. I will. I promise. She hit post, and almost immediately, notifications began to ping. Likes and comments flooded in, each one a tiny burst of affirmation. Joshua felt a strange mix of pride and unease as he watched the numbers climb. Looks like people love it, he said, his voice barely audible over the distant strum of a guitar from the band. Emily nodded, her thumb hovering over the screen as she read a particularly enthusiastic comment. Someone said we're living the dream. Feels good, doesn't it? He took another sip of his champagne, the bubbles tickling his throat. It does. But I can't shake the feeling that we're missing something bigger. Emily turned to face him fully, her expression earnest. What do you mean? He hesitated, then spoke slowly, as if choosing each word with care. I keep thinking about Dad. He's been holding down the fort while we're out here having fun. I wonder if he feels forgotten. Emily's brow furrowed. We talk to him all the time. We sent him that picture of the sunset last night. He said it was beautiful. Joshua nodded. He did. But I think he's waiting for us to come back, to step back into the house, to help with the stuff we left behind. He's not saying it, but I can see it in his voice when we call. She fell silent, her gaze drifting to the horizon where the sun now sat low, a molten sphere threatening to slip beneath the water. The wind carried a faint scent of salt and something else, maybe the faint aroma of dinner being prepared in the ship's galley. Maybe we should call him tonight, she said quietly, just to check in, see how he's doing. Joshua smiled, grateful for her willingness. Yeah, let's do that after dinner. Maybe we can even promise to help out more when we get back. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Deal. We'll make it right. The band launched into a lively tune, and a few passengers began to dance on the deck, their movements carefree and joyful. Emily's eyes lit up again, and she tugged at Joshua's arm, Come on, let's dance. We've got to make the most of every minute. He laughed, standing up, and allowed her to pull him toward the makeshift dance floor. As they moved, the world seemed to narrow to the rhythm of the music, the warmth of the sun on their skin, and the feeling that, for now, they were exactly where they wanted to be. Later, after the music faded and the stars began to prickle the night sky, they found a secluded lounge chair near the stern. The ship's lights twinkled like distant fireflies, and the ocean stretched out, dark and endless. Emily rested her head on Joshua's shoulder, her breathing slow and steady. You know, she murmured, I keep thinking about Mom's video. She told Dad to sell the house and live freely. I never really got what she meant until now. Joshua turned his head to look at her, his expression thoughtful. She wanted him to be free from the weight of always taking care of us. She wanted him to enjoy his own life. Emily lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. Do you think he'll be okay? He considered the question. The gentle sway of the ship beneath them, the faint hum of the engines far below. I think he'll be fine if we start showing up for him. Not just with money, but with our time. If we listen. She nodded, a determined set to her jaw. We'll do better, I promise. A soft chime sounded from the ship's intercom, announcing that midnight buffet was about to open. Joshua smiled, feeling a strange sense of resolve mingling with the lingering joy of the day. Ready for some dessert? He asked. Emily grinned, sitting up straight. Always. They rose from their chair, hand in hand, and walked toward the glowing lights of the buffet. The night air warm against their skin, the ocean's vastness, a quiet reminder that life, like the sea, was ever moving forward, whether they were ready to face it or not. A camera flash blinked against the freshly painted front door of the Harrington house. Sarah Jenkins adjusted the angle of her lens, checking the light that spilled across the porch steps. The morning sun caught the fresh white paint and made the shutters glow like fresh snow. A young man with a tote bag slung over his shoulder adjusted the tripod, checking the focus on the polished brass handle. Perfect, Sarah said, her voice low enough not to startle the sparrows that hopped near the hydrangeas. Let's get the wide shot first. Then we'll move inside. The photographer nodded, adjusting the strap on his camera. He stepped back, framing the house with the oak tree in the foreground. The leaves whispered in a gentle breeze, casting dappled shadows on the walkway. Sarah walked toward the front door, her hand brushing the smooth wood. She paused, listening to the quiet street. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance, and a car rolled past on the asphalt, its tires humming softly. Everything looks good, she said, turning to the photographer. Let's get the living room next. I want the light from the bay window to show the hardwood. Inside, the rooms were empty of personal photographs, but the furniture remained. A worn sofa, a wooden coffee table, a bookshelf filled with spines that told stories of decades past. The photographer moved quietly, capturing the way the light fell across the rug, the way the shadows pooled beneath the wingback chair. Sarah walked slowly through each room, noting the details that would appeal to a young family. She paused in the kitchen, running her fingers over the cool marble countertop. This kitchen still has that good old school charm, she murmured to herself. A family will love the space for Sunday pancakes and homework at the table. She stepped into the master bedroom, where the morning light painted the walls in a soft gold. The bed was made with crisp white sheets. The nightstand's empty except for a small vase holding a single dried rose, a souvenir from Margaret's garden that William had asked to keep. Sarah smiled gently. We'll keep that rose for the owners if they want it. It's a nice touch. The photographer clicked the shutter again, capturing the quiet dignity of the room. When the shoot finished, Sarah thanked the photographer and gathered her equipment. She stepped onto the porch, pulling out her phone to check the time. The screen showed a notification from the community Facebook group, a reminder about the upcoming yard sale on Saturday. She tapped the notification, and a new post appeared at the top of her feed, drafted earlier that morning. She read it over, then added a line about the open house scheduled for Saturday afternoon. "Ready to post?" she asked herself, tapping the share button. The post went live within seconds, accompanied by 3 bright photos. The front facade bathed in morning light, the spacious living room with its sunlit windows, and the backyard garden where the rose bushes bloomed in soft pink. Just then, a silver sedan rolled slowly down the street, its driver glancing at the for sale sign planted in the yard. The driver was Mrs. Gable, a retired schoolteacher who had lived on Maple Street for over 40 years. She slowed her car, rolling down her window to get a better look. "Well, look at that," she muttered to herself, her eyes narrowing as she read the caption. "William Harrington is selling the family home. I wonder what brought that on." She pulled over, parked her car, and walked toward the house, her sensible shoes clicking on the sidewalk. As she approached, she saw Sarah packing up her camera bag near the side gate. "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," Mrs. Gable said, offering a warm smile. "I couldn't help but notice the sign. Is the house really going on the market?" Sarah turned, wiping her hands on a towel. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable. Yes, we're listing it today. William Harrington decided to sell after his wife's passing. He wants to start a new chapter." Mrs. Gable's brow furrowed slightly. "I hope he's doing all right. I've seen Joshua and Emily around less lately. They used to stop by for lemonade in the summer." Sarah nodded. "I've heard the same. It's been quiet around here since the funeral." Mrs. Gable glanced toward the street, where a moving truck was parked 2 houses down, its rear doors open as workers carried boxes inside. "Seems like the neighborhood is changing," she said softly. Sarah smiled politely. "Change can be good. It gives a family a fresh start." Mrs. Gable tipped her hat and walked back to her car, pausing once more to look at the house before driving away. Back at her kitchen table, Sarah opened her laptop and checked the post's performance. The first comment appeared within minutes, from a user named Brenda. "Wait a minute, isn't that the Harrington house? Where are those kids of theirs? Joshua and Emily. Haven't seen them around lately." "Seen them around lately," Brenda wrote, attaching a screenshot of a recent cruise ship selfie that showed Emily holding a glass of champagne, Joshua grinning beside her with a tropical drink in hand. Sarah read the comment, her eyebrows lifting. She glanced at the photo, recognizing the ship's deck rail and the bright blue ocean behind them. She remembered seeing Emily's story a few days earlier, a video of her laughing at a buffet table, the caption reading, "Living my best life." She replied quickly, keeping her tone friendly but factual. "Hi, Brenda. Thanks for pointing that out. The Harrisons are indeed the owners. Joshua and Emily have been away on a trip. The sale is proceeding, as Mr. Harrington wishes." She hit post, then leaned back in her chair, staring at the screen. A pang of sadness touched her chest as she thought of Margaret's quiet strength, the way she had tended her roses every morning despite the ache in her bones. That same it was lapping. The memory of her mother had filled with perfume. She closed the words. "New room is for a good for a new the house is." She made a decision, and the next morning, she called William to let him know the listing was live. "Mr. Harrington, the post is up," she said, her voice calm and steady. "We've already had a few inquiries. Would you like to meet this afternoon to go over the showing schedule?" William's voice came through the speaker, soft but steady. "Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your discretion. Please let me know if anything comes up." "Will do," Sarah replied. "I'll keep you posted." She ended the call and glanced at the comment thread again. Brenda had replied, adding a second comment. "Thanks for the reply. I just hope they realize what they're walking away from. The house has been in that family for generations." Sarah smiled faintly. She knew the truth of those words, but she also knew William's reasons were rooted in love, not spite. Later that afternoon, William arrived at the house in his modest sedan, the same car he had driven for the past 10 years. He stepped out, adjusting his coat against the early autumn breeze, and walked up the walkway where Sarah waited with a clipboard. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending her hand. "Let's walk through together and note any questions the buyers might have." He shook as she felt the wood under his shoes. They stepped into the living room, and they entered the house, and William paused in the hallway, his hand resting on the banister. The scent of old wood and faint lavender from Margaret's sachet still lingered in the air. He looked at the family photos that remained on the console table. Pictures of Joshua and Emily as children, grinning on a backyard swing. Margaret laughing at a birthday cake, William holding Joshua's hand on his first day of school. "These stay," William said quietly, his voice thick. "I'd like to keep them for myself." Sarah nodded. "Of course. We'll make sure they're packed separately." They moved to the kitchen, where William opened the pantry and took out a tin of tea leaves Margaret had bought from a specialty shop in Boston. He held it to his nose, inhaling the familiar bergamot scent. "She loved this tea," he said, a small smile forming. "Every Sunday morning she'd sit by the window with a cup and read the paper." Sarah placed a gentle hand on his arm. "It's a lovely memory." William nodded, then turned to the backyard. The garden was still tidy, the rose bushes pruned, the stone path clear. He walked to the spot where Margaret used to sit with her knitting, a small wooden bench under the shade of the maple tree. He sat down, the wood warm from the sun, and looked out over the yard. A squirrel darted across the grass, chasing a leaf that twirled in the breeze. "I think she'd like the new owners to enjoy this space," he murmured. "She always said a home should be filled with laughter, not just walls." Sarah stood nearby watching him. "She would be pleased to know the house will go to a family who will cherish it." He stood, brushing off his trousers, and met her gaze. "Thank you for handling this with care, Sarah. It means a lot." She smiled. "It's my pleasure. I'll keep you updated on any offers." He gave a small nod and walked back to his car, the engine humming softly as he pulled away from the curb. As he drove down Maple Street, he glanced in the rearview mirror. The "For Sale" sign stood tall beside the sidewalk, the letters crisp against the white paint. A few neighbors stood on their porches, watching the car go by, their faces a mix of curiosity and sympathy. One of them, a young man with a skateboard tucked under his arm, called out, "Hey, mister, is the house really for sale?" William rolled down his window. "Yes, it is. Thank you for asking." The young man shrugged. "Cool. Good luck with the move." William gave a faint smile and drove on, the streets of the neighborhood passing by in a blur of maple trees and brick facades. Later that evening, after he had settled into his modest apartment, William opened his laptop and checked the Facebook post again. The comment thread had grown. Brindle had added another reply. "I saw the kids' cruise photos again. It's hard to believe they were on a luxury ship while their mom was in the hospital. Just saying." A second comment from a user named Mark T appeared beneath hers. "Yeah, and look at the comments on their posts. People are calling them out for being selfish. Sad situation." William read the words, feeling a quiet ache settle in his chest. He thought of Margaret's voice in the video she had left for him, her words soft but firm. "Don't let them waste your life, William. Sell the house. Live freely." He closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair, and let the silence settle. The house was no longer his to keep, but the memories remained, woven into the fabric of the streets he walked each day. Outside, a night breeze rattling a scent of distant rain, and for the first time in weeks, William felt a breath of ease settle over his shoulders. The next morning, a notification pinged on his phone. It was a message from Sarah. "Mr. Harrington, we have an offer. Would you like to review it?" He tapped the notification, his heart steady, and opened the email. The offer was solid, the closing date reasonable, and the buyers seemed eager to make the house their home. He typed a quick reply. Please proceed with the offer. Let's move forward. He hit send, leaned back, and stared out the window at the quiet street. The world continued its steady rhythm. And for now, that was enough. Mr. Harrington, we have an offer, Sarah said, her voice steady as she tapped the screen of her tablet. I leaned forward in the chair opposite her desk, the late morning light catching the dust motes that drifted above the polished wood. Tell me the details, I said, keeping my tone even. It's strong, well above asking. And from a young family, she replied, scrolling through the document. They are pre-approved and ready to close quickly. I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, not from fear but from the weight of the moment. I pressed my palms flat against the armrests, feeling the coolness of the leather. What are their plans for the house? I asked. They want to raise their toddler here, Sarah said, her eyes meeting mine. They spoke of planting a garden in the backyard and keeping the original oak doors. An image formed in my mind of small hands turning the soil, of laughter echoing off the walls where Margaret once hummed while she knitted. I let the thoughts settle, then turned my attention to the numbers. The closing date they propose is the end of next month, Sarah continued. That gives us 6 weeks to finish packing and move to the apartment. I nodded, recalling the promise I had made to Margaret just weeks ago. I remembered her fragile hand in mine, the soft insistence in her voice. Don't let them waste your life, William. Sell the house. Live freely. I had not allowed myself to dwell on the sorrow then. Now I focused on the practical steps ahead. I would like to suggest a slight adjustment to the timeline, I said, choosing my words carefully. If we could push the closing to the beginning of the following month, it would give me a little more time to ensure the transfer of the trust proceeds without delay. Sarah considered this, her finger pausing over the screen. That's reasonable, she said. The buyers seem flexible. They emphasize they are eager but not rigid. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. The house stood silent behind me, its rooms waiting for the next chapter. I pictured the hallway where Joshua and Emily had raced as children, their shoes scuffing the floorboards. I saw Margaret arranging fresh flowers on the entry table each spring, her smile bright despite the worries that lingered beneath the surface. May I walk through the house one more time before we finalize anything? I asked. Of course, Sarah replied, standing. I'll join you, if you'd like. We moved from the office into the quiet street, the sun casting long shadows across the sidewalk. The for sale sign stood tall beside the white paint, its letters crisp against the morning sky. A few neighbors lingered on their porches, their gazes shifting between the sign and the modest car that waited at the curb. As we approached the front door, I placed my hand on the cool brass knob. The familiar click echoed softly, and I stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and faint lavender greeting me. Sarah followed, her shoes barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. We entered the living room, the space where Margaret had spent countless afternoons reading by the window. The sofa remained in place, its cushions slightly indented from years of use. I ran my fingertips over the armrest, feeling the faint wear where her hands had rested. It still holds her presence, I murmured, more to myself than to Sarah. She smiled gently. She would be pleased to know it will go to a family who will cherish it. We moved to the kitchen, the room where Margaret had prepared countless meals, her humming a constant backdrop to the clatter of pots. I opened the refrigerator door, the cool air rushing out, and saw the small magnet she had bought from a seaside town years ago. A tiny lighthouse chipped at the edge. I closed the door, leaving the magnet where it was. The buyers mentioned a garden, Sarah said, glancing toward the back door. Shall we look outside? I nodded, and we stepped onto the stone path that wound past the rose bushes Margaret had tended with such care. The blossoms were just beginning to bud, their pink hues promising a full bloom in weeks to come. A squirrel darted up the trunk of the maple tree, its tail flicking as it paused to observe us. She always said a home should be filled with laughter, I said, watching the squirrel scamper away. Not just walls. Sarah placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip light but reassuring. The new owners will hear that laughter soon enough. We returned inside, heading toward the master bedroom. The bed was made with the crisp white linens Margaret favored, the pillow still bearing the faint imprint of her head. I traced the seam of the quilt with my thumb, feeling the soft stitching that had survived countless washes. It's hard to leave, I admitted, my voice low. But I think she would want me to find peace elsewhere. You are honoring her wish, Sarah said. That is the greatest tribute you can give. We paused in the hallway, where a small wooden bench stood beneath the window. Margaret had sat there each evening, knitting scarves for the grandchildren while the sun dipped below the horizon. I ran my palm over the smooth surface, feeling the faint grooves left by her needles. I will keep this bench, I said suddenly. It reminds me of her quiet strength. Sarah's eyes softened. That seems fitting. We can arrange for it to be moved to your apartment. I felt a surge of gratitude. Not for the words, but for the understanding in her gaze. Thank you, Sarah. She nodded. Now, let us discuss the counter-offer. We retreated to her office, where she pulled up the contract on her laptop. I settled into the chair, the leather creaking softly as I shifted my weight. The buyers are willing to meet our requested date if we adjust the price by a modest amount, she said, pointing to a line on the screen. An increase of $5,000 would satisfy their budget while still reflecting the home's true value. I considered the figure, thinking of the trust fund Margaret had envisioned. The proceeds intended to support end-life care for others in our community. The additional sum would not strain the buyers, nor would it diminish the purpose I hoped to fulfill. I agree, I said. Let us proceed with that adjustment. She typed the change, the numbers shifting on the screen. The revised offer will be sent to them within the hour. Should they accept, we can move forward with inspections and paperwork. I felt a quiet resolve settle in my chest, steady as the beat of a distant drum. I stood, stretching my shoulders, and walked to the window that looked out onto the street. The neighborhood continued its steady rhythm, children riding bicycles, a gardener trimming hedges, the occasional wave from a familiar face. I will keep you updated on any developments, Sarah said, gathering her papers. Please do, I replied, my voice firm. And thank you for handling this with care. She smiled, gathering her things. It is my pleasure. I will call you by this evening with their response. I walked to my car, the engine humming softly as I turned the key. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. The for sale sign stood tall beside the sidewalk, its letters catching the late afternoon light. A few neighbors still lingered on their porches, their expressions a mix of curiosity and sympathy. The house faded behind me, but the promise I had made to Margaret remained vivid in my mind, a steady beacon guiding each step forward. I slammed the car door shut and stared at the modest apartment building where William now lived, the brick facade dulled by late afternoon light. A thin layer of dust clung to the windowsill, evidence of days spent indoors. I inhaled, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, and turned toward the rusted mailbox bolted to the wall. The metal creaked as I lifted the lid, revealing a single envelope addressed in a familiar hand. My thumb brushed the rough paper before I slipped it inside my coat pocket, feeling the weight of the paper against my thigh. I walked up the 3 concrete steps, each step echoing softly in the quiet street. The front door stood ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling onto the porch. I pushed it open and stepped inside, the scent of polished wood and faint lavender greeting me. The living room was sparse, a single armchair facing a window that framed a sky streaked with pink and orange. I set my bag down beside the chair and pulled out my phone, the screen glowing faintly in the dim light. A notification blinked, a message from Joshua. I hesitated, then tapped to open it. The words glowed on the screen. Hey, Dad, Back in town. Want to grab dinner? We should talk about the house and how we'll manage everything moving forward. Below it, Emily's addition glimmered. Yeah. We want to see how you're doing and maybe discuss how we'll sort out the estate. I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest, but I let the phone slip back into my pocket without replying. I moved to the small kitchen, the linoleum cool under my bare feet. I filled the kettle with water, the metal singing as it settled on the burner. While I waited, I glanced at the wall where a faded photograph of Margaret and me hung, taken at our 25th anniversary. Her smile was soft, her eyes bright. I turned away, the heat rising in my cheeks as I remembered her voice, low and steady, urging me to let go of the house. The kettle whistled, a sharp sound that cut through the quiet. I poured the water into a chipped mug, the steam curling upward like a thin veil. I lifted the mug, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, and took a slow sip. The bitter taste of coffee grounded me, reminding me of mornings spent at the kitchen table with Margaret, sharing silent companionship over the morning paper. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail notification. I pressed play, and Joshua's voice filled the small kitchen, tinged with frustration. Dad, seriously, we need to talk about the house. This isn't a joke. We can't just ignore this. We're counting on that property. The message ended with a click, leaving an echo of urgency in the air. I set the mug down gently, the ceramic clinking softly against the counter. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass, watching a squirrel dart across the lawn below. The world seemed to move in slow motion, each leaf trembling in the breeze as if holding its breath. A soft knock sounded at the door. I turned, my hand resting on the latch, and opened it to find Emily standing on the porch, her arms crossed, her eyes flashing with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "You can't do this," she said, her voice low, but edged with steel. "That's our house. Our things are still inside." I stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. She crossed the threshold, her shoes scuffing the wooden floor. I closed the door gently, the latch clicking into place. "Come in," I said, keeping my tone even. "Let's talk." Emily followed me into the living room, her gaze sweeping over the sparse furnishings. She stopped beside the armchair, her fingers brushing the fabric absently. "We just got back from the cruise," she began, her voice rising slightly. "Mom would have wanted us to enjoy life. This trip was already paid for. It's practically a gift from her." I felt a familiar tightness in my jaw, but I kept my voice steady. "The cruise was booked months ago, before Mom's condition worsened. She knew about it, but she also asked me to sell the house after she passed." I paused, choosing each word carefully. "She left a video for me, explaining her wishes. She wanted me to live freely, not to be drained by endless requests for money." Emily's eyebrows knit together. "She never said that to us." "You're twisting her words." She crossed her arms tighter, her posture defensive. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped a restless rhythm against her arm. I stepped toward the bookshelf, running a finger along the spine of an old travel guide Margaret had kept from our trip to Maine. The leather cover was worn, the pages softened by time. I lifted it gently, feeling the weight of memories embedded in its spine. "She told me she saw the posts you made while she was in the hospital," I said, my voice low but firm. "She saw the photos of you on the deck, the champagne glasses, the captions that dismissed her funeral as just another event." Emily's eyes flicked to the floor, then back up, her lips pressing into a thin line. "We were trying to cope," she murmured. "Everyone deals with grief differently." I nodded slowly, acknowledging her point without conceding. "Coping looks different for everyone," I replied. "For Mom, coping meant making sure I had a future that wasn't tied to your financial needs. She worried that the pattern of dependence would continue long after she was gone." A sudden knock at the door made both of us jump. I moved to answer it, opening to find Joshua standing there, his expression a mix of determination and exhaustion. He shoved his hands into his pockets, his jaw clenched. "Dad, we need to talk about the house," he said, his voice louder than necessary. "You can't just cut us off like this." I stepped back, letting him enter. He closed the door behind him, the sound echoing in the quiet hallway. I gestured toward the sofa, and he sank onto the cushion, the springs creaking under his weight. Emily remained standing, her arms still crossed, her eyes darting between us. "You think I'm doing this out of spite?" I began, choosing my words to show, rather than tell my resolve. "But I'm honoring a promise I made to the woman who raised us, who sacrificed so much to give us a stable home." I paused, letting the silence settle between us. "She watched you both grow. She celebrated your birthdays. She held you when you were sick. She also saw the pattern of requests for money, the trips that always seemed to coincide with a need for cash." Joshua leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "We always intended to pay you back," he said, his tone earnest. "We just hit a rough patch. The business took a hit, and we needed a bridge." I watched his hands, the way they fidgeted with the edge of his sleeve. "The house was never a loan," I replied. "It was a gift, a place for you to rebuild when you needed it. Over the past 12 years, I covered taxes, insurance, repairs, and I sent you monthly checks that totaled over $180,000. That was not an investment. It was a lifeline." Emily's voice rose, tinged with hurt. "You're making it sound like we're parasites. We helped around the house. We paid for groceries sometimes. I lifted a hand, not to silence her, but to signal a pause. "I remember the nights you stayed up late helping Mom with the garden. The mornings you drove me to the doctor's office when I couldn't drive myself. Those moments matter. But the financial support went beyond occasional help. It became a steady stream that allowed you to avoid confronting your own financial responsibilities." A soft chime sounded from my phone on the coffee table. I glanced at it. A notification from the storage company, reminding me that the unit for Joshua and Emily's belongings would be ready for pickup in 2 days. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the slight vibration against my thigh. Joshua's gaze shifted to the window, where the light was fading into twilight. "What about the storage fees?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "We can't afford that." I met his eyes, seeing the flicker of worry beneath his frustration. "The storage company will send you an invoice with the due date. You'll need to arrange payment to keep your items there. I've already arranged for the movers to pack and transport everything. The cost of the move is covered by the proceeds from the sale." Emily's shoulders slumped slightly, the anger in her expression giving way to something softer, perhaps resignation. "We'll figure it out," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. I stood, feeling the weight of the day settle in my bones. "I'll give you the details for the storage unit and the moving company in writing. It's best to have everything documented so there's no confusion later." I turned to retrieve a sheet of paper from the desk, my fingers brushing the cool surface of the laminate. I wrote down the address, unit number, and contact information, then handed the sheets to both of them. Joshua took the paper, his thumb tracing the edge of the paper as he read. Emily folded hers carefully, placing it in her purse. "Thank you for letting us get our things," she said quietly, her voice lacking its earlier edge. I nodded, feeling a faint sense of relief mixed with lingering sorrow. "You're welcome. I wish you both the best as you move forward." I walked them to the door, opening it just enough for them to step onto the porch. The evening air was cool, carrying the distant scent of rain on the pavement. As they descended the steps, I watched them get into their car, the engine humming to life. I closed the door softly, the latch clicking once more, and leaned against the wood, feeling the vibrations of the departing vehicle fade into the night. I turned back inside, the house quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. the streetlights beginning to flicker on, one by one. A sense of settled purpose settled over me, not because I felt triumphant, but because I had honored a promise made to the woman I loved. The low rumble of the moving truck vibrated through the floorboards, and I saw Emily flinch. I stood in the empty hallway, watching the back doors of the truck swing open. Two men in navy coveralls stepped out, stretching their arms before grabbing the first set of boxes. Their movements were practiced, efficient, each motion timed to the next. I felt a strange calm settle in my chest, the kind that comes when a long-planned step finally begins. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," the taller mover said, his voice steady. "We'll start with the master bedroom unless you'd like a different order." I nodded, keeping my voice low. "Please begin with the items marked for storage in the study. The rest can follow." He glanced at his clipboard, then signaled his partner. They moved toward the study, their boots making soft thuds on the hardwood. I followed at a distance, hands clasped behind my back, watching as they lifted a sturdy oak desk. The wood was warm under their gloves, the surface scratched with years of use. Emily hovered near the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes darting between the men and the empty shelves. "Everything that belongs to you and Joshua will be packed and moved to storage," I said, my tone even. "You will receive details about the unit and the payment schedule shortly." She swallowed, her throat working. "You can't just take our things. This is still our home." I shook my head slowly. "The house has been sold. The proceeds will go to the memorial fund Margaret wished for. Your belongings are being stored until you make other arrangements." Her cheeks flushed, and she opened her mouth to protest. But a sharp laugh escaped instead. "You're doing this to punish us. After everything we've done for you," I held up a hand, palm outward. "I am not punishing anyone. I am honoring my wife's final wish. She asked me to sell the house and live freely. I am doing exactly that." She stared at me, eyes glistening, then turned and walked quickly toward the kitchen. I heard the faint clink of a coffee mug being set down hard on the counter. The mover in the study called out, "Box 1, desk, labeled JH1. His partner replied, "Got it." I turned my gaze to the living room where a sofa faced the empty fireplace. The cushions bore the imprint of countless evenings spent watching television with Margaret. A soft blanket lay folded on the arm, its fringe frayed from years of use. I remembered her humming while she knitted, the yarn catching in the lamplight. The movers approached, lifting the sofa with practiced ease. The fabric whispered as it left the frame. A soft sigh that seemed to echo the room's memories. A thin line of sweat formed on my forehead despite the cool morning air. I wiped it with the back of my hand, feeling the familiar roughness of my wedding band against my skin. The weight of the band reminded me of the promise I had made years ago, and the promise I was keeping now. "Sir, should we label the boxes by room or by owner?" the shorter mover asked, holding a marker. "By owner," I replied. "Label each box with the initials of the person whose items are inside. That will make the handover clearer." He nodded, scribbling JH on a cardboard flap. I watched as he sealed the box with tape, the sound sharp and final. Emily reappeared in the doorway, holding a framed photograph of Joshua and her as children, grinning in front of the old oak tree in the backyard. She stared at it for a long moment, then slipped it into a box marked EH2. "Are you sure you want to keep that?" I asked gently. She looked up, eyes wet. "It's all we have left of them." I nodded. "Take what you need. The rest will be safe." She swallowed again, then turned and walked back toward the stairs, her steps slow and deliberate. The mover called out, "Box 3, bedroom set, JH3. The sound of wood scraping against wood filled the hallway as they maneuvered the bed frame. I felt a pull in my chest, not of sorrow, but of resolve. Each item removed was a step toward the life Margaret envisioned for me, one unburdened by endless demands, I walked to the kitchen, where the movers were already packing the pantry shelves, cans of soup, boxes of pasta, jars of spices, each item a testament to the meals we had shared, the quiet breakfasts, the holiday feasts. Take the spices first, I said. They're the most fragile. The taller mover nodded, lifting a small wooden rack. He placed it gently into a crate labeled EH4. I noticed Emily pause at the threshold of the dining room, her hand resting on the back of a chair. She looked at the empty space where the china cabinet had stood, now a bare wall waiting for its new owners. "Will they take the china?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "That stays with the house. It belongs to the new family." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "Of course it does. Everything stays except us." I felt a pang, but I kept my voice steady. Margaret wanted me to be free. This house was never yours to keep. She turned away, her shoulders tightening. I heard the soft click of her phone as she pulled it from her pocket. A moment later, a sharp intake of breath escaped her lips. She stared at the screen, eyes widening. "What is it?" I asked, though I already guessed. She shoved the phone toward me, the screen glowing with a notification. "Look, your lawyer just emailed us the storage details." I took the device, scanning the message. The subject line read, "Storage unit details. Harrington belongings." The body listed the facility name, unit number, access code, and a monthly fee spelled out in words. $125 per month. A due date was noted. Payment required within 5 days of receipt. I handed the phone back, my expression neutral. "You will receive a formal email with the same information. Payment is due promptly." Emily's face flushed crimson. "You expect us to pay for storage of our own things? This is outrageous." I kept my tone even. "The storage fee covers the secure facility and the moving service. It is not a penalty." She threw her hands up. "This is a joke. You're stealing from us." I felt a familiar tightness in my jaw, but I let it pass. "I am following Margaret's wishes. If you have questions, you may contact my lawyer directly." She glared at me, then spun on her heel and strode toward the front door. The movers called out, "Box 5. Living room decor. EH5. The sound of glass clinking softly as a vase was wrapped in bubble wrap followed. I stood alone in the hallway for a moment, listening to the hum of the truck's engine idling outside. A thought slipped into my mind, quiet but insistent. What would they do when the bill arrived? I pushed the thought aside and turned to follow the movers to the garage, where they were loading the final boxes onto a dolly. The garage smelled of oil and old rubber. A bicycle leaned against the wall, its tires flat. I remembered teaching Joshua to ride it, his small hands gripping the handlebars, his laughter ringing through the spring air. The movers lifted the bicycle, securing it with straps. I watched as they rolled it toward the truck, the metal frame catching the morning light. "All set, Mr. Harrington?" the shorter mover asked, wiping his brow with a cloth. I nodded. "Thank you for your care." He gave a curt nod in return. "We'll be on our way now." The truck's engine rumbled to life, a deep sound that seemed to shake the very foundation of the house. I walked back inside, each step echoing on the bare floors. The rooms felt larger now, emptier, as if the walls were exhaling after holding their breath for years. I paused in the study, where the desk had been. A faint outline of where it stood remained on the carpet, a subtle shift in the fibers. I knelt and ran my fingers over the spot, feeling the faint indentation left by years of elbows resting while I worked on blueprints. A soft smile touched my lips. Margaret would have appreciated the quiet. I stood and walked to the front door, pulling it open. The street was quiet, a few cars passing lazily. I looked down the sidewalk and saw Emily and Joshua standing near their car, arms crossed, faces set in hard lines. Joshua held a piece of paper, his brow furrowed as he read. Emily's eyes were fixed on the house, her jaw tight. I called out, voice calm but firm. You will receive the storage details via email. Please review them carefully. Joshua looked up, his expression hardening. We'll see about that. He slipped the paper into his pocket and slid into the driver's seat. Emily followed, slamming the door shut. The engine coughed to life, and the car pulled away, tires kicking up a faint spray of dust from the curb. I watched the vehicle disappear down the street, then turned back toward the house. A sense of completion settled over me. Quiet and firm. I closed the front door, leaned my forehead against the cool wood, and breathed deeply. The house stood silent, waiting for its new chapter. 2 days after the moving truck disappeared down our street, the first whispers began. I was pulling weeds from the rosebed when Mrs. Lowell from across the lane called over the fence, her voice low but eager. Did you hear what's happening at the Harrington place? She asked, glancing toward the empty driveway where the moving van had been. I wiped my hands on my apron and shook my head, keeping my tone neutral. I've been busy with the garden, I replied. She lowered her voice further, as if sharing a secret. Brenda from the coffee shop says she saw Joshua and Emily's cruise photos posted the day after the funeral. A chill ran through my shoulders, though I kept my face calm. Is that true? I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. She shrugged, her eyes darting to the street where a couple with a stroller paused to look at the for sale sign. She swears she saw champagne glasses and a caption about celebrating life. She said, people are talking. I thanked her and turned back to the soil, the scent of damp earth grounding me as the gossip settled like dust on the leaves. Later that afternoon, I walked to the corner store for a newspaper. The bell above the door jingled, and I caught Brenda's voice rising above the hiss of the espresso machine. She stood by the window, a phone in her hand, showing a group of 3 neighbors, a screen filled with bright ocean and a smiling couple holding drinks. Look at that, she said, tapping the image. Mom's funeral was barely cold, and they were already on that ship. The man beside her, Mr. Patel, frowned. I saw the same thing on my feed, he muttered. They called it a celebration of life trip. Brenda nodded, her expression tight. And read what Emily wrote under the photo. Something about making the best of it. Mom would have wanted us to enjoy life. The woman next to Mr. Patel, Mrs. Clark, crossed her arms. It feels wrong, doesn't it? While Margaret was in the hospital, they were already planning that getaway. Brenda leaned in, lowering her voice. I checked their comments on the family chat, too. Joshua said the cruise was pre-booked ages ago. Emily added champagne emojis. No one mentioned the illness. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach, but I kept my expression neutral as I paid for the paper and stepped back onto the sidewalk. The bell chimed again as I left, and I heard Brenda whisper to Mr. Patel, "We should tell William what we found." I pretended not to hear, focusing on the headline about the town's upcoming fair. That evening I sat on the porch steps, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, when Mrs. Gable from 3 doors down approached, her tote bag swinging lightly. She stopped at the bottom of the steps, her smile polite but concerned. "Good evening, William," she said. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but I heard some talk about the house sale." I set the cup down on the rail and met her gaze. "I appreciate your concern," I replied. "Everything is proceeding as Margaret wished." She nodded, her eyes flicking to the moving truck's empty space in the driveway. "There's been a bit of chatter at the coffee shop," she continued. "People are wondering why the children aren't around, especially after seeing those cruise pictures." I kept my voice even, choosing my words carefully. "My wife made her wishes clear before she passed. I am honoring them." Mrs. Gable hesitated, then added, "Just know that if you need any help, the neighborhood is here." I thanked her and watched her walk back toward her home, the sound of her heels fading on the pavement. The words lingered, a reminder that the private matter had become public. The next morning I decided to check the community Facebook page myself, curious about the tone of the conversation. I opened the browser on my laptop and scrolled past the usual posts about lost cats and yard sales. Near the top, Sarah Jenkins's announcement of the listing caught my eye. Her professional photos showing the sunlit kitchen and the garden blooming with late spring flowers. Below it, Brenda's comment sat in bold. Wait a minute. Isn't this the Harrington house? Where are their children, Joshua and Emily? Haven't seen them around lately. A thread of replies had already formed beneath it, had grown, each response adding a new layer of speculation. One neighbor wrote, I saw their cruise photos the day after the funeral. They looked like they were having a ball. Another added, Emily's caption said Mom would have wanted them to enjoy life. Talk about timing. A third person, whom I recognized as Mr. Hayes from the book club, commented, It's hard not to feel sorry for William after all he's done for them. I felt a flush rise to my neck, but I forced myself to read on, noting how the conversation shifted from curiosity to judgment. A woman named Lisa posted, If they were really struggling, they wouldn't be posting champagne selfies. The thread continued, each comment pulling the situation further into the public eye. I closed the laptop and went to the kitchen to make lunch. The clatter of dishes a small distraction from the buzzing in my head. As I chopped vegetables, the back door opened, and a young couple stepped onto the porch, their hands clasped, a baby carrier tucked against the woman's chest. They looked at the for sale sign, then at the house itself, their expressions a mix of hope and scrutiny. The man, wearing a faded baseball cap, turned to his partner and said quietly, Looks this place still on the market? She nodded, glancing at the windows where the curtains swayed slightly in the breeze. It looks lovely, she replied. I can already picture our little one playing in that yard. Before they could walk up the steps, a voice drifted from the sidewalk where two neighbors lingered, their voices low but carrying. Did you hear about the Harrington kids? The woman asked, her tone tinged with disbelief. They were on a luxury cruise while their mother was being laid to rest. The man beside her scoffed. And now they act like the house belongs to them. Unbelievable. The woman's eyes narrowed. It's no wonder the neighbors are calling them ungrateful heirs. The young couple exchanged a glance, the woman's hand tightening on the carrier's strap. She whispered, Maybe we should look elsewhere. The man hesitated, then said, Let's keep looking. There's no rush. They stepped back toward the sidewalk, their conversation fading as they walked away, leaving me alone on the porch with the echo of their words. I remained there until the light began to slant toward the horizon, the sky turning a soft amber. The hum of the street grew quieter, the occasional car passing like a whispered thought. I pulled the collar of my jacket tighter, feeling the weight of the day settle on my shoulders. The house behind me stood silent, its windows dark, its doors locked, waiting for the next chapter to begin. A thought slipped in, quiet but insistent. The story they were telling was not mine to write. I pushed it aside, stood, and brushed off my jeans before heading inside, the door closing softly behind me with a final click. Dad, open up. We need to talk this out. This is ridiculous, Joshua shouted. I stepped back to let them in, the narrow hallway feeling tighter than usual. The scent of old paper and faint lavender from Margaret's sachet lingered near the coat rack, a quiet reminder of the promise I had made. Joshua pushed past me, his shoes scraping the worn rug. What is this place, Dad? Where's our house? What have you done? He demanded, his voice rising with each word. Emily lingered just inside the doorway, her eyes scanning the sparse furnishings. She crossed her arms tighter, the fabric of her sweater pulling at her elbows. You can't just erase us from our home, she said, her tone edged with desperation. I closed the door softly, the click echoing in the quiet space. I moved to the small kitchen area and poured 2 glasses of water, the sound of the faucet a steady rhythm. Please, sit, I said, gesturing to the 2 chairs opposite the modest sofa. My voice remained level, the words deliberate, as I tried to steady the sudden surge of emotion beneath my calm exterior. Joshua slumped into one chair, his shoulders hunched. Emily perched on the edge of the other, her fingers tapping a rapid pattern on her knee. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of the wood beneath my feet, and began. "You received the email about the storage unit, did you not?" I asked, choosing my words to keep the conversation anchored in fact rather than feeling. Joshua's jaw tightened. "We got it. It's a joke. You think we'll pay for a box to keep our things?" He snapped, his voice edged with disbelief. Emily leaned forward, her eyes glistening. "You said you were honoring Mom's wishes, but selling the house feels like a punishment," she said, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I placed the glasses on the chipped coffee table, the condensation leaving tiny rings. "Margaret recorded a video for me before she passed," I said, choosing to show rather than tell the depth of her intent. "In it, she asked me to sell the house and live freely. She feared you would waste my life with constant demands." Joshua scoffed, a short, harsh sound. "She never had went about us." "You're twisting her words to suit your own agenda." I felt a flicker of irritation, but I let it pass, focusing on the facts I could verify. For over 12 years, I paid the taxes, insurance, and repairs on this house. I also provided you with monthly support that totaled more than $180,000. Those numbers come from bank statements I keep in my desk. Emily's gaze dropped to her hands. "We have always intended to repay you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head slightly, the motion small but deliberate. Repayment was never discussed as a condition. The support was a gift, given freely, with no expectation of return. Joshua stood abruptly, the chair scraping backward. "You're acting like a tyrant. We'll sue you for emotional distress, for taking what's ours." I held up a palm, the gesture calm but firm. "The house was never yours. It belonged to Margaret and me, held in a revocable trust for my benefit." The lawyer confirmed that any financial aid was a grant, not a loan. Emily's eyes flashed. "You're cutting us off just to spite us." I let the silence settle for a moment, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then I spoke again, my tone softening just enough to convey sincerity without weakening my resolve. "I am not trying to hurt you. I am trying to honor the woman who raised us, who sacrificed so much for this family. Her final wish was that I live without the burden of endless obligation." Joshua sank back into his chair, his expression shifting from anger to something akin to bewilderment. "What about us? Where are we supposed to go?" I reached for the folder on the table, the one containing the storage unit details. I slid it toward him without looking directly at his face, a small act of deference. "Your belongings are already in storage. The unit number and access code are in the paperwork. The fee is $125 per month, due within 5 days of receipt." Emily snatched the folder, her fingers trembling as she opened it. She read the numbers, her breath catching. "We can't afford that," she whispered, her voice cracking. I felt a pang of sorrow, but I kept my voice steady. "You will help. I will not continue the support, but the rest. I promise that you have a woman and I will not rescind my decision. The sale proceeds have already been set aside for the Margaret Harrington Memorial Fund for End-of-Life Care. That fund will support families facing the very struggles we have endured." Joshua stared at the floor, his fists unclenching slowly. "You're destroying everything we've built." I shook my head, the motion slight. "You built nothing on a foundation of debt and reliance. The house was never an investment for you. It was a home for Margaret and me." Emily stood abruptly, her chair tipping backward before she caught it. "You don't understand what it's like to struggle every day," she said, her voice rising. I met her gaze, my own eyes calm but steady. "I understand loss. I understand the weight of responsibility. I also understand that continuing to enable dependence would have harmed us all in the long run." A sudden knock at the door made us all turn. I moved to answer it, peering through the peephole to see Mrs. Gable from next door, holding a small plate of cookies. I opened the door just enough to speak, keeping the chain engaged. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Gable. Is everything all right?" She smiled, her eyes flicking to the two figures behind me. "I heard voices and wanted to check if you needed anything. The neighbors have been talking, and I thought perhaps you might appreciate a friendly face." I thanked her politely, declining the offer with a gentle shake of my head. "Thank you, but we are fine. Please convey my appreciation." She nodded, stepping back down the walk. I closed the door, the soft click sealing us back inside. Joshua let out a humorless laugh. "Great. Now we've got an audience." Emily crossed her arms again, her expression hardened. "We need to think of a plan. Maybe we can convince him to reverse the sale." I felt a sudden urge to clarify, to show, rather than tell the depth of my conviction. I walked to the small bookshelf and pulled out a worn photograph of Margaret and me on our wedding day, her smile bright, my hand resting gently on hers. I placed it on the table, where the light from the window caught the silver frame. "This is why I am doing this," I said, my voice low but clear. Margaret wanted peace for herself and for me. She did not want her legacy to be a source of endless conflict. Joshua's eyes lingered on the photo, his expression softening for a heartbeat before hardening again. "Peace at our expense," he muttered. Emily's shoulders slumped. "What are we supposed to do now?" I hesitated, then chose my words carefully, aiming to show a path forward without offering false hope. "You have the storage unit. You have your belongings. You have the ability to seek work, to budget, to live within your means. It will not be easy, but it is possible." A thought struck me like a quiet question, a micro-hook that lingered in the air. I wondered if they would ever see the truth of her words, or if the hurt would cloud their judgment forever. Joshua pushed himself up, his chair scraping loudly. "We're not going to beg you for mercy." Emily stood as well, her face set. "We'll figure this out on our own." I moved to the door, opening it fully this time. The hallway stretched beyond, neutral and quiet. "Take care," I said, my tone devoid of anger, edged only with the sorrow of a promise kept. They passed me without another word, their steps echoing on the thin carpet as they descended the stairs. I listened until the sound faded, then closed the door softly, the latch clicking into place. I leaned against the wood, feeling the coolness seep into my palms, and exhaled slowly. The apartment felt smaller than before, the walls seeming to press in slightly, but the quiet that settled was mine to keep. I walked to the small desk, opened the drawer, and retrieved the lawyer's letter confirming the trust's terms. I read it once more, the words sharp and clear, then placed it back, satisfied that the legal ground stood firm. The afternoon light waned, casting long shadows across the floor. I turned off the lamp, the room slipping into gentle dimness, and made my way to the modest bedroom. I lay down on the narrow bed, the springs sighing under my weight, and let the day's events settle like dust on a windowsill. In the silence, I thought of Margaret's voice, soft and certain, echoing from the video she left behind. I felt no triumph, only the steady resolve that comes from honoring a love that asked for nothing more than peace. I lifted the tablet from the coffee table and pressed play. The soft click echoed in the quiet apartment as Margaret's voice filled the room. I watched Joshua and Emily shift on the couch, their expressions tightening as her words began. "Joshua, Emily, this is not your house. It was Margaret's and mine, and it is being sold, as per Margaret's final clear wishes." My voice stayed low, steady, each syllable landing like a stone in still water. Emily's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about, Dad? The house has always been ours." She crossed her arms, the movement sharp against the faded fabric of the sofa. I lifted a folded spreadsheet from the side table and tapped it gently. "For 12 years you have lived here rent-free. I have paid the taxes, The insurance, the repairs. I have given you money each month, totaling more than $180,000, not counting the ongoing costs of the house itself. My fingers traced the columns, feeling the weight of each entry. Joshua leaned forward, his voice rising. We always intended to pay you back. We helped out around the place, didn't we? His hands gestured vaguely, as if the air could hold the labor he claimed. I shook my head, the motion small but deliberate. Help came in the form of occasional lawn mowing, never the steady flow of funds that kept the roof over your heads and the lights on. I let the silence settle for a beat before continuing. Margaret's voice emerged from the tablet, clear despite the slight hiss of the speaker. I know they only visit when they need money or ask about the will. William, please, sell the house. Don't let them waste the rest of your life. You deserve peace. I've ensured you have it. Emily's eyes flashed, a spark of anger igniting. She never said that about us. Hardened into disbelief. She said what? She never said that about us. You're twisting her words. She shoved herself upright, the couch springs protesting under her weight. I lowered the tablet, the screen darkening. She recorded this the week before she entered the hospital. I have the lawyer's affidavit confirming its authenticity. I tapped the folder beside me, the edge catching the light. Joshua's jaw tightened. This is a trick. You're trying to make us feel guilty, so we'll sign over anything you want. His voice dropped, edged with something that sounded like fear. I met his gaze, my own steady. I am not asking for guilt. I am stating fact. The house belongs to the trust, and the trust is for my benefit alone. Any money I gave was a gift, not a loan. I let the words hang, feeling the quiet strength that had grown since Margaret's passing. A soft knock at the door broke the tension. I glanced toward it, then back at the siblings. Excuse me a moment. I rose, my shoes whispering against the hardwood, and opened the door to find Mrs. Gable holding a small potted plant. Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington. I thought you might like this for your windowsill. A little piece, if you will. Her smile was warm, her hands offering the plant with gentle care. I accepted it, feeling the cool ceramic against my palm. Thank you, Mrs. Gable. That is very kind. I stepped aside, letting her enter briefly before she retreated down the hall, her footsteps fading. I closed the door softly, the latch clicking into place. Returning to the living room, I found Joshua staring at the spreadsheet, his fingers tracing a line of numbers. Emily stood by the window, her reflection glassy in the pane. I lifted the tablet again, this time opening a video file labeled Margaret Final. The screen lit with her face, eyes bright, smile soft. William, if you are hearing this, I hope you are well. Her voice wavered just slightly, a tremor of emotion held in check. I have watched you give and give, hoping one day they would see the cost. I could not bear to see you spend your years paying for their comfort, while they never learned to stand on their own. Emily's breath hitched, a small sound that she tried to mask with a cough. She turned away, her shoulders rigid. Joshua's mouth opened, then closed. He swallowed hard, the motion visible in his throat. I let the video run a few seconds longer, capturing Margaret's final words. Sell the house. Live freely. I've made sure you can. The screen faded to black. I set the tablet down, the quiet pressing in. That is what she wanted. Not vengeance. Not punishment. Peace for both of us. Emily's voice came out thin, almost a whisper. You think we are ungrateful? She looked at me, eyes glistening with unshed tears that seemed more fury than sorrow. I shook my head slowly. I think we are all caught in a pattern she saw clearly. She wanted to break it. I paused, feeling the weight of her gaze. You have the storage unit. You have your belongings. You have the ability to work, to budget, to live within your means. Joshua pushed himself up, the chair scraping loudly. We are not going to beg you for mercy. His tone was flat, the words edged with resolve. Emily stood as well, her face set. "We'll figure this out on our own." I moved to the door, opening it fully. The corridor extended onward, plain and silent. "Take care," I said, my tone devoid of anger, edged only with the sorrow of a promise kept. They went by me in silence, their footsteps resonating on the slim carpet while they walked down the stairs. I listened until the noise died down, then shut the door gently, the latch slipping into place. I rested against the wood, sensing the chill enter my hands, and breathed out slowly. The dwelling seemed reduced compared with earlier, the walls appearing to close in a bit. Yet the tranquility that settled belonged to me. I went to the little desk, opened the drawer, and fetched the attorney's note verifying the trust conditions. I read it again, the wording precise and evident, then returned it, content that the legal basis was solid. The afternoon light faded, spreading long shadows across the floor. I switched off the lamp, the room easing into soft darkness, and proceeded to the modest bedroom. I lay down on the narrow bed, the springs groaning beneath my weight, and allowed the day's happenings to settle like dust on a windowsill. In the quiet, I recalled Margaret's voice, gentle and sure, reverberating from the video she left behind. I felt no victory, only the firm determination that arises from honoring a love that requested nothing beyond peace. I heard Brenda's phone chime with a soft alert as she scrolled through the regional Facebook group on her tablet. She laughed softly, the sound bright despite the tension in her voice. "William, you need to see this," she said, her fingers tapping the screen. I leaned closer to the speaker, the crackle of the connection filling the quiet apartment. "What is it?" I asked, my curiosity piqued by her urgency. Brenda's voice dropped, tinged with both excitement and concern. "Someone posted about Joshua and Emily in the Harrington group. They shared screenshots of the cruise in the family chat. It's blowing up." I felt a knot tighten in my chest, the kind that forms when old wounds are rubbed raw. "Read it to me," I said, needing to hear the exact words. Brenda cleared her throat, her tone shifting to a more formal cadence as she read aloud. "Shocking behavior from our town residents. While their mother was ill and after she passed, Joshua and Emily Harrington were living it up on a $47,000 cruise. See the proof from their own social media. Number ungrateful heirs. Number family drama. Number Harrington house." The words landed like a stone in a still pond, each syllable sending ripples through the room. I could picture the post already, the bold hashtags catching the eye of anyone scrolling for drama. Brenda continued, her voice rising slightly as she described the reaction. "People are sharing it left and right. Comments are flooding in, calling them ungrateful, calling out their extravagance while their mother lay in a hospital bed." I swallowed, the taste of metal coating my tongue. "Did they include any of the cruise photos?" I asked, needing to visualize the evidence that would fuel the fire. Brenda laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Oh yes, the screenshots are attached. There's Emily holding a cocktail, Joshua laughing at a buffet, the ship's deck sparkling behind them. It looks like a vacation brochure." I felt a surge of frustration, not at the children but at the situation that had spiraled beyond my control. "What about the family chat messages?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Brenda's tone turned sheepish. "They captured Joshua's message calling the trip a celebration of life, and Emily's champagne emojis. The comments underneath are brutal, people saying they deserve what's coming." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, the air leaving my lungs in a slow rush. "Thank you for telling me," I said, gratitude genuine despite the turmoil. Brenda's voice softened. "You're not alone in this, William. The community sees what you've been trying to do." I nodded, even though she couldn't see the gesture. "I appreciate that." The call ended with a soft click, leaving me alone with the hum of the refrigerator and the weight of the unfolding scene. Minutes later, My own phone began to ring, a sharp trill that cut through the quiet. I glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number labeled local news. I hesitated, then answered, my voice calm despite the pounding in my temples. Hello? A cheerful reporter introduced herself, her tone bright and eager. Good afternoon, Mr. Harrington. I'm calling about the story circulating online regarding your wife's funeral and your children's cruise. May I ask a few questions? I felt a flash of annoyance, but I kept my tone measured. I appreciate your interest, but I prefer to keep this matter private. The reporter persisted, her voice sliding into a persuasive cadence. Our viewers are eager to understand the full picture. A brief comment would help us present a balanced story. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. I have already shared my side with those who needed to hear it. I will not be participating in any further publicity. She sighed, the sound audible through the line. I understand. Thank you for your time. The line went dead, and I set the phone down. The screen flashing missed call. Almost immediately, another line lit up, this time labeled Community Bulletin. I answered, expecting another inquiry. A woman's voice, familiar from the neighborhood watch group, greeted me. William, it's Marge from Maple Street. Have you seen the post? It's all over the town page. I confirmed that I had, my voice steady. Marge's tone was a mix of concern and indignation. People are saying terrible things about Joshua and Emily. Some are even calling for a boycott of the businesses they're associated with. I felt a pang of sorrow for the boys. Not because I excused their actions, but because the backlash threatened to spill over into their livelihoods. I hope they can find a way to mend things, I said, choosing my words carefully. Marge agreed, her voice softening. They're young. They'll learn. Just hope the lesson isn't too harsh. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before she ended the call, leaving me to stare at the ceiling. The fluorescent light, humming overhead. As the afternoon waned, a notification buzzed on my tablet. A headline from a regional news site. Local family feud escalates online after funeral cruise controversy. I tapped the link, the article loading with a mix of text and embedded screenshots. The headline was bold, the subheading promising an in-depth look at the fallout. I read the opening paragraph, which recounted the funeral, the cruise, and the social media uproar in stark, factual language. The article included the same screenshots Brenda had shown me, the cruise photos vivid against the stark white of the hospital room images from earlier in the week. Scrolling down, I saw a quote from a neighbor, identified only as a longtime resident, calling the children's behavior a blatant display of entitlement. Another quote, from a local business owner, warned that reputational damage could affect future opportunities. I felt a familiar tightness in my jaw, the same sensation I'd felt when Margaret's health began to decline. My phone vibrated again, this time a text from an unknown sender. I opened it to find a message from a number I didn't recognize, the text plain and direct. You did the right thing. Stay strong. I frowned, unsure whether to feel comforted or unsettled by the anonymous support. I typed a quick thanks, then locked the screen, deciding to disengage for a while. Later, the doorbell rang, a sharp, insistent chime that made me start. I walked to the door, peering through the peephole to see a young woman holding a stack of flyers, her badge identifying her as a representative from a credit counseling service. I opened the door just enough to speak, the chain still engaged. Can I help you? I asked, my voice polite but guarded. She smiled, attempting to be reassuring. Hi, Mr. Harrington. We noticed some recent activity on your credit report and thought you might benefit from a free consultation. I felt a surge of irritation. The implication that my financial state was under scrutiny was unwelcome. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested, she persisted, her tone shifting to a more persuasive cadence. Many people in your situation find that a little guidance can prevent bigger problems down the road. I shook my head, the motion small but firm. Thank you, but I'll manage on my own. She nodded, her smile fading slightly, and retreated down the steps. I closed the door, the lock clicking into place, and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for a moment. As evening settled, I received another call, this time from a number marked Joshua. My heart skipped, then steadied. I answered, bracing for confrontation. His voice came through, strained and loud, as if he were standing in a crowded room. Dad, we need to talk about what's happening online. This is ridiculous. I listened, letting him vent without interruption, hearing the frustration and fear lace through his words. He accused me of twisting Margaret's words, of painting them as villains, to justify selling the house. I kept my responses calm, repeating the facts as I knew them. The house was mine. Margaret's video made her wishes clear, and the financial support I'd provided was a gift, not an obligation. He grew more agitated, his volume rising, until I heard a muffled voice in the background. Emily, I assumed, saying something about needing to focus on work. When Joshua finally paused, I spoke slowly, choosing each word to avoid escalation. I understand you're upset. I never wanted this to become a public spectacle. My only goal was to honor Margaret's request. He scoffed, the sound harsh through the speaker. Easy for you to say when you're not the one losing everything. I felt a pang of sympathy, but I held my ground. You still have your belongings in storage. You have the ability to work, to budget, to rebuild. He snorted, a sound laced with bitterness. You don't get to decide what's best for us. I let the silence stretch for a beat, then offered a final thought. If you need to talk again, I'm here. He didn't respond, the line going dead with a soft click. I set the phone down, the screen dark, and walked to the window. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the pavement. My thoughts drifted to the storage unit, the place where Joshua and Emily's belongings now sat, waiting for them to face the reality of their situation. I imagined the metal door, the hum of the climate control, the rows of boxes labeled with their names. Around that time, a soft chime sounded from my tablet, a notification from a social media app I rarely checked. I tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting another news alert. Instead, a video thumbnail appeared, showing a young woman with dark hair laughing loudly, her head thrown back, a crystal glass raised in a toast. The overlay text caught my eye, written in bold white letters, Mother's Day celebration. On her funeral day? Number so classy. Number Harrington drama. I felt a chill run down my spine, not from cold, but from the sheer audacity of the moment captured. The video was brief, just a few seconds, but it showed Emily in the midst of a formal dinner on the cruise ship, surrounded by elegantly dressed passengers, her laughter ringing out as a server poured champagne. The caption implied a stark contrast between the mournful occasion back home and the carefree revelry at sea. I watched the clip twice, each viewing sharpening the sting. The woman in the video was unmistakably Emily, her expression unguarded, her joy palpable. The background displayed the ship's opulent dining room, chandeliers sparkling, waiters gliding silently between tables. The video ended with a quick pan to a menu card, the logo of the cruise line visible in the corner. I felt a wave of nausea, the kind that rises when you witness something you know will be weaponized. My phone buzzed again. This time, a direct message from a follower I didn't recognize. The text read, "Saw the video. Disgusting. They deserve everything coming their way." I stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly as I fought to keep my composure. I typed a short reply, my fingers trembling. "Thank you for your concern." I hit send, then locked the device, the screen going black. Later, as night deepened, I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it to find Brenda standing there, her expression earnest, a small potted plant cradled in her arms. "I thought you might like this," she said, holding it out. A peace lily. It's known for thriving in low light, a symbol of peace and renewal. I took the pot, feeling the cool ceramic against my palms, the soil slightly damp. "Thank you, Brenda. That's very kind." She smiled, her eyes warm. "You're doing the right thing, even if it's hard right now." I nodded, feeling a flicker of something akin to hope. She lingered a moment longer, then turned and left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. I carried the plant to the windowsill, placing it where the moonlight could touch its leaves. I sat down in the armchair, the fabric soft beneath me, and let the silence settle. The house was quiet, the only sounds the occasional hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic far below. I thought about Margaret's voice from the video she'd left behind, her words steady and loving. I thought about the promise I'd made to her, to sell the house and live freely, not as a pawn in anyone else's game. I thought about the storm swirling outside my walls, social media outrage, news inquiries, my children's anger, but I also felt a quiet certainty that I was honoring the love that had asked for nothing more than peace. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness wrap around me, and listened to the night breathe. I stared at the email, disbelief clawing at my chest. The subject line read, "Your storage unit details. Action required." My fingers hovered over the trackpad, reluctant to open it. A soft chime from the kitchen reminded me the kettle had boiled. I pushed the chair back and walked to the stove, pouring water into my favorite mug. Steam curled upward, catching the morning light that slipped through the blinds. I inhaled the scent of chamomile, trying to steady my thoughts. The notification blinked again, insistent. I tapped the screen and the message unfolded. "Dear Miss Harrington, your unit number is 12B at Valley View Storage. Access code is 4321. Monthly rent is $125. Payment is due within 5 days. Please refer to the attached invoice for further details." My breath hitched. $125 each month. I glanced at the bank app on my phone. The balance showed a pitiful $234 after the cruise debt payment. My throat tightened. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from a sudden, sharp panic. Joshua appeared in the doorway, hair still damp from his shower. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, his usual smirk absent. "What's got you looking like you saw a ghost?" he asked, voice low. I turned the tablet toward him, the email glowing on the screen. He read it silently, his brow furrowed. That can't be right," he muttered. "Dad said he'd take care of everything." I swallowed hard, the words catching. He said he was honoring Mom's wishes. He didn't mention storage fees. My voice came out tighter than I intended. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my tone level. "We need to see this place." He pushed off the frame and gestured toward the garage. "Let's go." Maybe it's a mistake. We drove in silence, the city streets blurring past. The radio played a low hum of talk shows, but neither of us spoke. My hands rested on the wheel, knuckles white. I noticed the way my left thumb tapped an impatient rhythm against the leather, a habit I had tried to break after Mom's lecture about nervous tics. When we reached the storage facility, the sight was stark. Rows of metal doors under a harsh sun. A small office with a flickering neon sign that read, "Open." A clerk sat behind a glass wall, chewing gum and scrolling through a tablet. I stepped forward, trying to sound polite. "Hello. We're here for Unit 12B, the Harrington storage." The clerk looked up, eyes tired but polite. He tapped a few keys and nodded. "Follow me." He led us down a concrete corridor, the echo of our steps bouncing off the walls. The air smelled of dust and faint oil, a sharp contrast to the lavender sachets I used to keep in my dresser drawers at home. He stopped before a door painted a faded blue. He punched in the code, and the door rolled up with a grinding groan. Inside, the unit was smaller than I had imagined, about the size of a small closet. Boxes stacked haphazardly reached nearly to the ceiling, each labeled with a black marker. Emily, clothes. Joshua, books. Misk, kitchen. A few items peeked out. A half-packed suitcase. A pile of mail. A box of photo frames. I felt a lump form in my throat as I recognized my favorite sweater, the one Mom had knitted for me last winter, tucked near the top. Joshua stepped inside, his shoes scuffing the concrete floor. He pulled out a box labeled Emily Clothes and began to pull out shirts, folding them hastily. "We can sell some of this stuff," he said, voice strained. "Maybe online." I shook my head, trying to keep my reaction from showing. "The fees are due in 5 days. $125 every month." I said the numbers aloud, feeling the weight of each digit. "We don't have that kind of cash." He paused, a shirt hanging from his fingers. His eyes flicked to the box of photo frames, then back to me. "What about Dad?" He said he'd help. His tone held a hint of desperation, the kind I heard when he begged for a loan after his last startup failed. I met his gaze, searching for the calm I usually projected. He said he's selling the house and moving on. He said any support was a gift. The words felt like stones in my mouth. I could see the hurt flash across his face before he masked it with irritation. "That's not fair," he snapped. "We helped around the house. We paid for groceries sometimes." I lifted my hand, palm up, to stop the argument from escalating. "I'm not arguing about fairness. I'm looking at a bill we can't pay." My voice stayed even, though my heart hammered against my ribs. I noticed the way his jaw tightened, a sign he was trying to hold back anger. He shoved the shirt back into the box and stepped out, the door clanking shut behind him. I remained inside, surrounded by the remnants of a life we had taken for granted. The hum of the climate control unit was a low, steady thrum, like a distant refrigerator. I ran my fingers over the edge of a box, feeling the rough cardboard. A thought struck me, sudden and sharp. What if we could negotiate a lower rate? I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the invoice. The clerk's voice came through, calm and practiced. "Valley View Storage. How may I help?" I identified myself and explained our situation. He listened without interrupting, then said, "I'm sorry, but rates are set. We can offer a temporary hold if you pay half now and the rest in 2 weeks. But that still requires $62.50 up front." I swallowed, the numbers spinning. I'll think about it," I said, ending the call. I leaned against the cold metal door, feeling the vibrations from the facility's generator through my soles. Outside, Joshua paced the length of the corridor, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He stopped, looked at me and said, "We could ask Brenda for help." The name surprised me. Brenda had been the neighbor who posted about our cruise. I remembered her offering a peace lily after Mom's funeral, her earnest smile. "She might not want to get involved," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. He shrugged, a half grin forming. "Worth a shot." He pulled out his phone and began typing. I watched his thumbs fly over the screen, the soft click of each key, a tiny metronome in the tense quiet. At that moment, a question formed in my mind, quiet but insistent. Could we actually sell enough of this stuff to cover the first month's rent and buy ourselves time? I pushed the thought aside, focusing on the present. I turned to face him, forcing a small smile. "Let's see what she says." He nodded, and we walked back toward the office. The echo of our steps a steady rhythm against the concrete. The sun had climbed higher, casting sharp shadows that stretched across the pavement. As we reached the glass door, I felt a flicker of resolve, fragile but present, like the first shoot breaking through frozen ground after a long winter. "I really hope this works," Joshua said, gripping the strap of his briefcase. As we stepped onto the marble steps of the downtown bank, the morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting soft ribbons of light across the polished floor. A faint scent of lemon polish mingled with the low hum of conversations from the teller lines. I adjusted the strap of my tote, feeling the weight of the day settle on my shoulders. A uniformed guard nodded at us as we passed, his expression neutral but attentive. We approached the reception desk, where a young woman with a neat bun greeted us with a polite smile. "Good morning. May I help you?" she asked. Joshua stepped forward, his voice steady despite the nervous edge I could hear. "We have an appointment with Miss Lowell at 10:15 for a small business loan discussion." She glanced at her screen, nodded, and gestured toward a hallway lined with framed certificates. "Please follow me. I'll lead you to her office." We followed her down a quiet corridor, the carpet muffling our steps. The walls were adorned with muted landscapes, each frame offering a brief escape from the busy lobby behind us. I noticed a small potted fern on a side table, its leaves a bright green that seemed out of place in the formal setting. When we reached the door marked Loan Officer, Miss Lowell, the receptionist knocked lightly and opened it for us. Inside, the room was warm, with a round wooden table surrounded by 4 upholstered chairs. A large window offered a view of the city skyline, though the blinds were half drawn, softening the light. Miss Lowell rose from her chair, extending a hand. She wore a navy blazer, her hair pulled back into a low ponytail, and her smile was professional yet welcoming. "Good morning, I'm Miss Lowell. Please have a seat." Joshua and I took the chairs opposite her. He placed his briefcase on the table, opening it to reveal a neatly printed business plan. I kept my hands folded in my lap, watching his fingers trace the edge of the paper as he began to speak. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice. I've been developing a platform that connects freelance designers with small businesses needing branding work. Over the past year, I've built a prototype, secured a few pilot clients, and I'm ready to scale." Miss Lowell leaned forward, her elbows resting on the table, her eyes scanning the document. "I appreciate the initiative. Could you walk me through your financial projections and the amount you're seeking?" She spoke clearly, her tone inviting but attentive. Joshua launched into his explanation, his voice gaining enthusiasm as he described projected revenue, marketing costs, and the need for $75,000 to cover initial hiring and office space. I listened, noting the way his eyebrows lifted when he talked about potential partnerships, the way his foot tapped lightly against the leg of the chair when he paused for emphasis. As he spoke, Miss Lowell flipped to the credit report section of her file. Her brow furrowed slightly as she read, "I see a recent luxury cruise expense charged to your personal card amounting to roughly $47,000, with several payment deferrals noted." She glanced up, her expression professional but concerned. "There's also an outstanding storage unit fee that appears to be overdue by 2 months. Joshua's smile faltered. He shifted in his seat, his hands clasping tighter around the edge of the table. "That cruise was a family thing, my mom. She passed recently. We thought it would be a nice tribute. The storage thing came up after we had to move some belongings out of the family home." He tried to keep his voice level, but I could hear the strain beneath his words. Miss Lowell nodded slowly, her fingers tapping a rhythm on the notebook before her. "I understand personal circumstances can affect finances. However, the combination of a large discretionary expense, deferred payments, and the storage arrears raises concerns about your current cash flow and ability to meet loan repayments." She paused, letting the words settle. "Based on the information available, I'm unable to approve this loan at this time. I would recommend focusing on reducing existing debt and demonstrating a steadier payment history before reapplying." Joshua's shoulders slumped, the energy that had animated his talk draining away. He stared at the paper in front of him, his jaw tightening. "Are you saying there's no way I could offer collateral? Maybe a personal guarantee?" he asked, his voice edged with frustration. Miss Leslie kept her tone steady, though a hint of sympathy slipped through. "Collateral would help, but the overall risk profile remains high given the recent spending patterns. I suggest you speak with a financial counselor to create a repayment plan for the cruise debt and storage fees. Once those are under control, we can revisit your application. She slid a brochure across the table toward him. Here are some local resources that offer free budgeting workshops. He picked up the brochure, his fingers brushing the glossy surface. Thanks, he said, the words sounding flat. He stood, gathering his papers with deliberate slowness. I rose as well, feeling the chair scrape softly against the floor. Outside the office, the hallway seemed louder, the hum of the air conditioning more pronounced. Joshua leaned against the wall, his forehead resting against his forearms for a moment, before he pushed off. I can't believe this, he muttered, more to himself than to me. All that work, and they just shrug it off because of a stupid cruise. His voice cracked, the frustration evident in the tightness of his throat. I reached out, touching his forearm gently. Maybe we can look at those workshops together. It could help us get a clearer picture of what we owe. I kept my tone even, hoping to offer a steadying presence without sounding dismissive. He glanced at me, his eyes flashing with a mix of embarrassment and defiance. You think I don't know that? I've been trying to keep up appearances, to make it look like I've got it all together. Now it's all out there for everyone to see. He kicked at the base of the wall, a small dust cloud rising from the linoleum. I let my hand fall back to my side, watching him collect his thoughts. The conversation in the loan office replayed in my mind. The numbers, the stern yet fair assessment, the way his dream had hit a wall of practicality. I felt a pang of sympathy, but also a flicker of relief that the bank had seen the risk clearly. We walked back toward the elevator, the mirrored doors reflecting our tired silhouettes. As we waited, a soft chime announced its arrival. The doors slid open, revealing a small cabin with polished steel walls. We stepped inside, and the doors closed with a quiet hiss. Inside the elevator, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I stared at the numbers above the doors, watching them descend. The ride was short, but the silence between us felt heavy. When the doors opened onto the ground floor, we stepped out into the busy lobby once more. A group of teenagers laughed near the entrance, their voices bright and carefree. I caught a glimpse of a flyer pinned to a community board, advertising a free financial literacy seminar at the local library next Saturday. The paper was bright yellow, the text bold and inviting. I felt a tug of curiosity, wondering if such a session might offer us a fresh start. We crossed the lobby toward the revolving doors, the cool air of the street greeting us as we stepped outside. The sun was higher now, casting sharp shadows across the sidewalk. Joshua stopped, turning to face me fully. I guess we have to figure this out on our own, he said, his voice quieter than before but firm. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle alongside my own resolve. We'll take it one step at a time, I replied, keeping my tone steady and hopeful. First, we'll look into those workshops, then we'll tackle the debts step by step. He exhaled, a breath that seemed to release some of the tension coiled in his shoulders. Thanks for coming with me. I don't know what I'd do without you. His gratitude was sincere, the edges of his voice softening. We walked toward the parking lot, the hum of distant traffic a steady backdrop. As we reached his car, he unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. I settled into the passenger side, fastening my seatbelt with a familiar click. The engine purred to life, and we pulled away from the curb, the cityscape sliding past in a blur of glass and steel. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of the bank's facade receding, its marble steps, a stark reminder of the meeting we'd just left. I felt a mixture of disappointment and determination settling in my chest. The road ahead was uncertain, but the resolve to face it together felt like a small, steady light guiding us forward. My phone buzzed incessantly on the nightstand, flashing with notifications that made the screen blink like a warning light. I snatched it up, thumb hovering over the screen as a flood of comments and messages flooded in. A familiar brand logo flashed at the top of a notification. The sponsor that had been paying me for travel posts had just sent a direct message. My stomach tightened as I opened it, reading the terse lines that announced the partnership was ending effective immediately due to recent events. Emily, after reviewing the recent video that surfaced, we have decided to pause our collaboration. We wish you the best. The message read. I stared at the words, feeling the blood rush to my cheeks as a hot sting rose behind my eyes. I tapped the screen to open the app where the video had been posted. The clip showed me laughing loudly at a cruise ship dinner. A glass of champagne raised high while a string quartet played in the background. The caption underneath, added by someone who had captured the moment, read, Mother's Day celebration on her funeral day? Number so classy. Number Harrington drama. The video had been clipped from a longer live stream I had done while the ship sailed, and now it was being shared with a cruel twist. A comment appeared under the video from a username I recognized as a former college roommate. Wow, you really have no shame, do you? Number heartless daughter. Another followed. Your mom would be ashamed. Enjoy the cruise while she's 6 feet under. My fingers trembled as I scrolled, each remark feeling like a pinch on my skin. I pressed the home button and opened my direct messages. A flood of messages poured in from acquaintances, some feigning concern, others openly reveling in my downfall. Hey Emily, I heard about the sponsor drop. Are you okay? A message from Maya read. I typed a quick reply, trying to sound steady. Thanks for checking in. I'm dealing with a lot right now. Almost instantly, another message arrived from a follower named Jenna. Saw the video. You're getting what you deserve. Number karma. I felt a flush of anger rise, but I forced myself to close the app and set the phone down. The room felt suddenly too small. The walls closing in as the hum of the air conditioner sounded like a distant buzz. I stood up, walked to the window, and pulled the curtain aside. The street below was quiet, a few cars passing under the glow of street lamps. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, trying to steady my breathing. A soft chime sounded from my phone again. I glanced at the screen and saw a comment on my most recent travel photo. A picture of me standing in front of a famous landmark, smiling with a suitcase in hand. The comment read, Nice trip. Too bad you can't afford the ticket home now. I swallowed hard, feeling the sting of tears that I refused to let fall. I turned away from the window and walked to my desk, where my laptop lay open. I logged into my analytics page and watched the numbers plummet. Followers dropping, engagement sinking, reach shrinking. The graph that had once climbed steadily now resembled a steep decline. I inhaled deeply and decided to address the situation head-on. I opened a new post, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I typed a short apology, hoping to quell the storm. I'm sorry for the pain my actions have caused. I never meant to disrespect my mother's memory. I am taking responsibility and will learn from this mistake. Before I could hit post, a notification popped up. A direct message from a user named Travel Guru 99. The message read, You think a sorry fix this? Delete the video and stop lying. My hand hovered over the delete button for the post I had just written. I felt a surge of frustration, but I forced myself to click delete instead, erasing the apology before it could be seen. I leaned back in my chair, the chair creaking under my weight. The room was dim, the only light coming from the screen's glow. I opened my photo gallery and began to delete old travel pictures, each deletion feeling like I was erasing a piece of myself that had once brought me pride. A soft knock on the door made me jump. I called out, Come in. My sister's voice came from the other side, hesitant but firm. Can we talk? I opened the door to see Emily standing there, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her eyes red from crying. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. I saw the video, she began, her voice low. I saw the comments. I don't know what to say. I moved to sit on the edge of my bed, patting the spot beside me. She sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I never thought it would blow up like this, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought it was just a fun clip, a moment of joy on a trip we'd saved for months. Emily reached out and placed a hand on my knee. You were trying to cope. I get that. But the timing, it looks awful. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle on my chest. I've been getting messages from people I haven't heard from in years. Some are sympathetic, others are cruel. She squeezed my knee gently. You need to protect yourself right now. Maybe step away from the apps for a while. I let out a shaky breath. I've already started deleting posts. I feel like I'm erasing my own history. Emily placed her brother's expression softened. I'll help you. We can go through the account together. Decide what stays and what goes. I managed a small smile. Thanks, Em. I don't know what I'd do without you. She stood, offering her hand to pull me up. Come on. Let's get some fresh air. Maybe a walk will help clear our heads. We slipped on our shoes and headed out into the night. The air was cool, the streetlights casting soft pools of light on the pavement. We walked in silence for a few moments, each step echoing our shared unease. As we passed a nearby park, a group of teenagers laughed loudly, their voices carefree. I glanced at them, feeling a pang of envy for their oblivious joy. Emily broke the silence. Do you think Mom would have understood? I stopped, turning to face her. She looked at me with earnest eyes, searching for an answer I wasn't sure I had. I don't know, I replied honestly. I wish I could ask her. She nodded, her gaze drifting to the darkened pond beside the path. She always said we should find joy even in hard times. Maybe she'd see this as a lesson. I exhaled, feeling a fraction of the tension ease. Maybe. We continued walking, the rhythm of our steps matching the quiet beat of the night. After a few blocks, we reached a small cafe that was still open, its warm glow inviting us inside. We ordered 2 cups of tea, the steam rising in delicate spirals as we sat at a corner table. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, feeling the heat seep into my palms. Do you think we'll ever recover from this? Emily asked, her voice soft. I took a slow sip, letting the flavor linger on my tongue before answering. I think we'll learn. It won't be easy, but we'll find a way forward. She nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. We'll take it one day at a time. Just then, my phone buzzed again on the table. I glanced at the screen and saw a notification from the sponsorship manager. We've reviewed your apology post. Unfortunately, we've decided not to reinstate the partnership. I felt a flash of disappointment, but this time it was quieter, less sharp. I showed the message to Emily, who read it and sighed. It's their loss, she said gently. I smiled, feeling a small shift inside. Maybe. We finished our tea in companionable silence, the clink of cups the only sound breaking the quiet. When we finished, we stood, gathered our belongings, and stepped back out into the night. As we walked back toward our building, a thought struck me like a quiet promise forming in the dark. I glanced at Emily and said, no matter what happens online, we still have each other. She squeezed my hand in return. Always. We reached the building's entrance, paused for a moment, under the soft glow of the lobby light, and then went inside, the night's chill fading behind us. As we stepped into the warmth of home, the low hum of the refrigerator vibrated against my palms as I gripped the cold porcelain of the kitchen counter, my knuckles turning bone white in the dim light of our cramped rental unit, my stomach twisted with a hollow ache that had nothing to do with hunger. It was the silence. The apartment was too quiet, lacking the constant, reassuring backdrop of Joshua's nervous pacing, or the incessant pings of notifications that had defined our lives for weeks. I turned, hearing the sharp click of the deadbolt. Joshua walked in, his shoulders hunched, his tie undone, and hanging limp around his neck. He didn't look at me. He just walked to the kitchen and stared at the empty space where a real coffee maker should have been, settling instead for the cheap, lukewarm carafe he had brewed an hour ago. "The bank manager called me," Joshua said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual confident cadence. He poured a cup of coffee that looked more like murky river water. "He said my business proposal wasn't just rejected, Emily. He said it was flagged. Apparently my name is starting to show up on lists I didn't even know existed." I sat on one of the mismatched wooden stools, my legs feeling like lead. "What kind of lists? Is it the cruise debt?" He laughed, a harsh, jagged sound that scraped against the walls of the tiny room. "It is everything. The cruise, the storage fees, the fact that the credit bureaus are now updating my profile with every late payment notification. It is the entire picture, and it is a masterpiece of failure. Dad didn't just sell the house. He dismantled our reputation piece by piece." I leaned forward, my pulse thudding in my throat. "We can fix this. If we just get ahead of the payments, if we find a way to settle the storage unit, people will stop looking. It is just noise, Joshua. It will fade." "Look at the screen, Emily," he said, pushing his phone toward me across the worn countertop. I picked it up. A new article from the local paper was open. It was a follow-up on the memorial fund William had established. The headline wasn't just about the charity, it was about the contrast. It listed, in excruciating detail, the timeline of our cruise against the timeline of Mother's passing. It felt clinical. It felt like a verdict. "It is not going away," Joshua whispered. "The memorial fund has received over $200,000 in donations from people who seem to think they are punishing us by being generous to him. Every dollar they give him is another nail in the coffin of our credibility." I felt the walls of the apartment closing in. The space felt less like a home and more like a holding cell for our own mistakes. Maybe we should call him. Not to argue, not to demand anything. Just to talk. To ask him to stop talking to the press. To ask him to let this settle. Talk to him? Joshua stared at me as if I had suggested we walk across the ocean. "The man is in his own world, Em. He's happy. He's free. He's doing exactly what he promised Mother he would do. And he's doing it with our money and our legacy." I stood up, needing to move, needing to shake the phantom weight of the house we had lost. "It is not just his legacy, Joshua. It is ours, too. I used to be the face of travel, of success, of the perfect life. Now, I am the girl who laughed while her mother was being buried. I can't even go to the grocery store without wondering if the cashier recognizes me from that TikTok video." "Then don't go," he snapped. "Don't leave. Stay here in this box until the world forgets us." The phone in my pocket vibrated, a long, persistent buzz. I pulled it out, my fingers trembling. It was a notification from the storage company. "What is it?" Joshua asked, his eyes narrowing. "They are auctioning the contents of the unit," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If the balance isn't paid by tomorrow morning, everything goes to the block. Everything. The photos. The boxes of our childhood. The furniture from Mother's study." Joshua stared at me, his mouth opening, then closing. He walked over and snatched the phone from my hand. He tapped the screen frantically, his eyes scanning the fine print of the notice. "They can't do this," he muttered, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself rather than me. "The law doesn't allow for an auction without more notice. The contract we signed when we moved everything in," I said, my throat tightening. "We didn't read it. We just signed the digital form so we could leave. It says they can liquidate upon 30 days of delinquency. We have been delinquent for 32. He dropped the phone onto the counter with a hollow clatter. "How much?" $2,000. "For the back rent, the late fees, and the administrative costs of the auction." $2,000 might as well have been $2 million. Our checking accounts were overdrafted. Our credit cards were blocked. And the last of our cash had gone toward the first month of rent in this miserable place. We have nothing left, Joshua said, looking around the kitchen as if expecting to find money hidden in the cupboards. The designer bags you kept, the watches I still have, we could take them to a pawn shop. Pawn shops won't give us $2,000 for those, Josh, I said, feeling the heat behind my eyes. They'll give us pennies on the dollar. It won't be enough to stop the auction. He paced the length of the kitchen. 3 steps. Turn. 3 steps. Turn. We need to go there. Right now. Maybe if we show up in person. If we explain that we are the children of the Harrington family. If we show them the legal documents William sent. Maybe they will grant us a grace period. That will make them want the money more, not less, I said. They don't care who we are. They care about the fee. I grabbed my purse, the leather strap feeling frayed under my fingers. I'm going to the unit. I'm going to see what is in there. Maybe there is something, anything, that we can pull out before they lock the gate for good. I'm coming with you, Joshua said, grabbing his keys. We drove in silence, the neon lights of the city blurring into meaningless streaks of color. The storage facility sat on the edge of the industrial district, a massive, windowless complex surrounded by high chain-link fencing topped with razor wire. The gate was open, a security guard sitting in a small booth reading a newspaper. We pulled up, the tires crunching on loose gravel. Joshua got out and walked toward the booth, his demeanor shifting into the practiced, slightly condescending posture he used when he thought he could manipulate someone. "Excuse me," Joshua said to the guard, who didn't look up immediately. "We are the Harringtons. We are here about Unit 408. We have been having some trouble with the automated payment system." The guard looked up slowly, pushing his glasses down his nose. He looked at Joshua, then at me, his expression entirely bored. "Office is closed. If you have an account issue, you come back when the manager is in at 8 tomorrow morning." "We can't wait until tomorrow," I interjected, stepping forward. "There is a notice about an auction. We are here to settle the balance." The guard chuckled. A dry, raspy sound. "Auction is set for dawn. The manager isn't taking payments in person for accounts already scheduled for liquidation. You want to pay? You use the portal. You want to clear the unit? You wait until the manager gets here. There has to be a way," Joshua said, his voice rising in volume. "This is our family's entire life in that unit. You can't just throw it away because of a software glitch." "Son, I don't set the policies," the guard said, picking up his paper again. "I just watch the gate. Unless you have the $2,000 in cash right now and a way to reach the head office after hours, you're not getting in." Joshua reached into his pocket, his hand hovering over his wallet. I knew it was empty. I knew he was bluffing. "Look," the guard continued, leaning back in his chair. "I've seen this a dozen times this month. People lose their houses. They pack their lives into metal boxes. They forget the rent. It is the same story every day. Go home. Call the office in the morning. Maybe they'll let you bid on your own stuff if you have the cash." Joshua turned away, his face twisting in a mask of impotent rage. He kicked at a stray rock, sending it skittering across the pavement. "We are done," I said, my voice shaking as I stared at the row of gray, identical doors stretching out into the dark. Everything is in there. Mother's wedding dress, the photo albums, the silver from the dining room. It is all going to be sold to strangers for a pittance. "It is not over yet," Joshua said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. "If they are holding an auction at dawn, there is someone who is going to be there to run it, someone who has the key to our future, and I am going to find out who that is." He walked back to the car and started the engine. I climbed in, my heart sinking as I realized that even if he did find someone, we had no use left. We were truly, finally, out of options. As the car turned back onto the main road, the headlights swept over the entrance to the facility. A sign was posted near the gate, illuminated by a flickering security light. It was a list of property, that had already been processed for liquidation. My eyes caught the name at the top of the list, printed in bold, black ink. Harrington, William. I leaned closer, my breath hitching. It was not our unit. It was the address of the storage facility itself. I realized then that William hadn't just moved our things. He had paid the first 6 months of the lease in his own name. He had been the one receiving the notices. He had been the one orchestrating the deadline. Joshua, stop the car, I said, my voice barely audible. What? Why? Stop the car. He slammed on the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a halt in the middle of the empty street. I pointed back at the sign near the gate. Look at the name. It wasn't us who failed to pay. He did. He set it up so that it would be liquidated while it was still under his name, but after he had already washed his hands of us. Joshua looked back, his eyes narrowing as he read the sign. The realization hit him, and for a moment, he didn't move. Then, he let out a strangled cry, his hands gripping the wheels so hard the leather creaked. He shifted into gear and spun the car around, accelerating back toward the gate, with a reckless, frantic speed that made my stomach churn. Where are you going? I yelled. I am going to make him pay for this, Joshua screamed, his voice breaking. He planned this from the start. He wanted us to lose everything and watch it happen. We screeched to a halt in front of the gate again, but the guard was no longer in the booth. The metal barrier was slowly lowering, the facility closing for the night. Joshua threw the car into park and jumped out, running toward the gate, but the steel arm dropped with a heavy final thud, locking us out of the only place where our history remained. He slammed his palms against the gate, the sound echoing through the empty, industrial night like a gunshot. 3 days after the storage unit gate slammed shut, my phone exploded with notifications. I stared at the screen as headlines scrolled across news apps, each one shouting about a scandal that felt like it had been ripped from our own living room. A local station had posted a video clip of our cruise ship deck, juxtaposed with a grainy photo of Mom's funeral service. The caption read, "Luxury trip while mother lies cold." My fingers trembled as I tapped the link. A reporter's voice filled my earbuds, describing how our family's name had become synonymous with entitlement. Sources close to the Harrington family say Joshua and Emily spent over $40,000 on a week-long cruise while their mother lay in a hospice bed, the anchor said. I could hear the disapproval in his tone, the way he lingered on the word extravagant. I swallowed hard, feeling the familiar sting of shame rise behind my eyes. I glanced over at Joshua, who sat on the edge of our narrow bed, his elbows resting on his knees. He was scrolling through the same article, his jaw tight. "They're twisting everything," he muttered, voice low. I could see the anger flickering behind his eyes, but also a flicker of something else. Fear. "Did you see the comment from that neighbor?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded, eyes still glued to the screen. Brenda from the cul-de-sac posted again. She's sharing screenshots of our family chat where we called the cruise a celebration of life. I swallowed again, feeling the weight of those words. Brenda's post had been shared hundreds of times, each share adding a comment that painted us as heartless. One read, "They deserve every bit of this backlash. Mom would be ashamed." Another said, "Kids these days think money grows on trees." I turned to Joshua, needing to hear his thoughts. "What are we going to do?" I asked. He let out a breath that sounded half laugh, half sigh. "I don't know. My boss called this morning. He said the investors are pulling back after seeing the news. They don't want their names attached to a scandal." His shoulders slumped, the usual bravado gone. I reached for my phone again, this time opening the cruise line's official statement. The words were bland, carefully crafted. "We remind all guests to adhere to appropriate conduct while on board." I could almost hear the corporate lawyer's sigh behind those lines. The statement did nothing to quell the fire. Instead, it seemed to fuel speculation that the company was trying to distance itself from us. A notification buzzed, a breaking news alert from a national outlet. The headline screamed, Harrington siblings face public backlash after luxury cruise during mother's funeral. I tapped it, and the article unfolded with a timeline that felt like a personal indictment. It detailed our spending on the cruise, the storage unit fees we could not pay, and even quoted an anonymous neighbor who said, "They acted like the world owed them a vacation while their mother was dying." I felt a hot wave of anger rise, but it was quickly swallowed by a deeper, colder dread. I turned inward. I had spent months curating an image of success, of adventure, of being the kind of influencer brands wanted to associate with. Now that image lay in ruins, each comment a crack in the facade I had built. Joshua stood suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I'm going to try to sell some of the stuff in storage," he said, voice edged with desperation. "If we can raise enough to cover the fees, maybe we can buy ourselves a little time." I nodded, though doubt gnawed at me. The storage unit held boxes of clothes, gadgets, and souvenirs from trips we could barely afford now. The thought of parting with those items felt like tearing pieces of ourselves away. We drove to the facility in silence, the city streets blurring past. When we arrived, the place looked even more stark under the gray afternoon sky. The metal doors loomed, each one a reminder of how far we had fallen. I swallowed as we approached our unit, the number painted in faded white. Inside, the space was cramped, boxes stacked haphazardly. I pulled out a designer dress I had worn only once, its silk still soft. I held it up to the dim light, feeling the absurdity of trying to sell something that once symbolized a lifestyle we could no longer sustain. Joshua rummaged through a box of electronics, pulling out an old laptop and a gaming console. "We can list these online," he muttered, already typing on his phone. As we worked, a notification pinged on my phone, a comment on Brenda's post that had gone viral. It read, "They deserve it. Margaret would have wanted William to live his life and not be their bank. This is a cautionary tale." The words struck me like a physical blow. I felt tears prickle behind my eyes, not because I agreed, but because the sentiment was spreading like wildfire, each share amplifying the judgment. We spent the next few hours photographing items, writing descriptions, and posting them on resale sites. This task felt utterly humiliating, each upload a stark reminder of our changed circumstances. When we finally stepped back into the car, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I turned to Joshua, his face pale in the fading light. "Will this ever truly be behind us?" I asked softly. He stared at the steering wheel, his fingers tapping a restless rhythm. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we have to try. She would want us to learn from this, even if it hurts." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of resentment and reluctant resolve. The road ahead was uncertain, the public's judgment a heavy cloak we could not easily shed. Yet as we drove away from the storage facility, a small spark of determination flickered within me, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we could choose to rebuild, piece by piece, if we were willing to face the truth of what we had done. "How are we supposed to live, Emily? We can't even afford to keep our things." I stared at the pile of bills on the cheap kitchen table, the paper edges curling from the steam of the single burner we shared. Emily pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her eyes fixed on the overdue notice from the storage company. "We have to sell something else," she said, voice tight. The laptop and the console brought in barely enough for last week's fee. I nodded, feeling the weight of each unpaid notice press against my ribs. The tiny apartment smelled of boiled cabbage and desperation, a far cry from the house we once called ours. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, a reminder that the world kept moving while we seemed stuck in quicksand. I pushed back the chair and walked to the narrow window, the curtain thin enough to let in the gray light of early morning. The street below showed a line of people waiting for the bus, faces tired but moving forward. I turned back to the room, my gaze landing on the box labeled Emily, Clothes. I lifted the lid, the scent of lavender detergent, faint but familiar. Inside lay a silk blouse she had worn only once, for a brand event that now felt like a lifetime ago. Maybe we can let this go, I said, holding the garment up. It could bring in a bit more. Emily's fingers brushed the fabric, then withdrew as if burned. It feels like giving away a piece of the life we pretended to have. She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. But we have no choice. I set the blouse aside and reached for the box of electronics. The laptop felt cold in my hands. The screen cracked from a fall we never bothered to fix. I remembered the nights we spent scrolling through listings, dreaming of upgrades that never came. Let's list them together, I suggested. We can take photos, write descriptions, post them tonight. She nodded, already pulling out her phone, thumb hovering over the camera icon. As we worked, the room filled with the soft clicks of shutters and the murmur of our voices. I described the laptop's specs. She snapped pictures of the console's worn controllers. Each click felt like a small surrender, a piece of our former selves being laid bare for strangers to judge. Midway through, my phone buzzed with a notification. A comment on Brenda's post had gone viral again. The words sharp and unforgiving. They deserve it. Margaret would have wished for William to live his own life rather than serve as their finances. This is a cautionary tale. I felt the sting rise, hot behind my eyes, but I swallowed it down, focusing on the task at hand. Emily's voice broke the silence. Do you think we'll ever get past this? She stared at the screen, reflection pale in the dim light. I hesitated, then answered honestly. I don't know, but we have to try. Mom wished that we would take a lesson from this, even though it pains us. I saw a flicker of resolve in her gaze, a stubborn spark that refused to be fully extinguished. We spent the next few hours photographing items, writing descriptions, posting them on resale sites. The process felt humiliating. Each upload a reminder of how far we had fallen. When we finally leaned back in our chairs, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the worn rug. I turned to Emily, her face illuminated by the fading light. Do you think we'll ever get past this? I asked softly. She stared at the ceiling, fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the armrest. I don't know, she admitted. But we have to try. Mom hoped we would draw insight from this, despite the hurt it causes. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of resentment and reluctant resolve. The road ahead remained uncertain, the public's judgment a heavy cloak we could not easily shed. Yet as we prepared to leave the cramped apartment, a small spark of determination flickered within me, a reminder that even in the darkest moments we could choose to rebuild, piece by piece, if we faced the truth of what we had done. I paced the narrow length of the kitchen, the soles of my shoes clicking against the linoleum. Every step felt like a rhythmic reminder of how small this space had become. Boxes were stacked against the wall, labeled with names I barely recognized as our own anymore. Emily sat at the small, wobbly table, her gaze fixed on a pile of final notices. The light outside the window struggled to penetrate the gloom of our apartment, turning everything into shades of gray. I reached for the teapot, my hands shaking just enough to rattle the porcelain against the stove. The lawyer called again, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the cramped room. He wants to know if we intend to challenge the trust distribution. He says the timeline for probate is closing. Emily did not look up. She kept her finger tracing the edge of a bill, her movements jerky. Challenge it with what, Joshua? We have $40 in the checking account. I sold the blouse, the one I wore to that event in Boston. It barely covered the electricity bill. I poured the water, the steam rising in thin, wispy columns. I am not saying we have the money. I am saying we have to decide. We cannot just sit here and watch everything vanish. Dad is selling the house. He is giving the money to that memorial fund, and we are left with nothing but these boxes. He was always going to do this, Emily said, finally meeting my eyes. Her expression was hard, stripped of the polish she once wore like armor. He spent 12 years waiting for her to give the signal. She finally did, and he acted. We were just the obstacles in his way. We are his children. I, William, snapped at Joshua, my 33-year-old son, setting the teapot down with a force that made the table jump. We are not obstacles. Emily let out a laugh that had no warmth in it. Look around, Joshua. Do you see the furniture? Do you see the house? We are whatever he decided we were. We are just things that need to be stored or sold. I walked over to the table and pulled out the chair across from her, the wood scraping harshly against the floor. I looked at the listings again. The laptop, the console, the designer watch. They are getting hits, thanks to the items we managed to retrieve from the storage unit. People are bidding. It is not much, but it is something. It is humiliation, she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. We are selling our lives piece by piece to strangers on the internet. Someone in Kansas is going to own my watch. Someone in Ohio is going to have my old gaming rig. Does it ever end? It ends when we stop needing the money, I said, leaning forward. We have to get jobs. Real jobs. Not the brand deals or the consulting gigs that never actually paid out. I mean something consistent. I am an influencer, Joshua, she said, though the words sounded like a rehearsed line she no longer believed. I was an influencer. Now I am just someone who failed. We failed, I corrected her. We failed because we assumed the well would never run dry. We assumed the house would always be there as a fallback. We assumed Mom would always be there to smooth things over with Dad. Mom is gone, Emily, my 30-year-old daughter said. She stood up and walked to the small counter, reaching for the remaining tea bags, and she left a video. She told him to cut us off. Do you really believe that? Do you believe she would have wanted us to live like this? I don't know what she wanted at the end, I admitted, rubbing my eyes. The morphine, the pain, the bitterness of seeing how we lived. It probably changed her. Maybe she didn't know us anymore. Maybe she just wanted Dad to have some peace before he died too. She chose him over us, Emily said, turning back with the tea mug in her hand. She chose him, and he chose his own comfort. They left us in the cold. They didn't leave us, I said, frustration boiling in my chest. We walked out into the cold because we thought we were made of something that couldn't freeze. We were wrong. The phone on the counter buzzed, a sharp, insistent vibration that made us both jump. I looked at the caller identification. It was an unknown number. I hesitated, then pressed the speaker button. Joshua Harrington? A crisp, professional voice asked. Yes, this is he, I said. This is the office of the clerk of court. We are reaching out regarding the petition for the Margaret Harrington Memorial Fund. You have been listed as a party, with potential standing for a final notification of asset transfer. Your presence is requested at the hearing on Monday. A hearing? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why? It is a standard procedure for large transfers of private assets into charitable trusts. If you have no objection, you may file a waiver. Otherwise, you must appear to present any claims. We will be there, I said quickly, before Emily could stop me. Very well. The notice will be mailed to your current address. The line clicked dead. I stared at the phone. Emily was pale, her hand trembling as she set her mug down. A hearing, she whispered. Could we challenge it? Could we claim undue influence? We would need a lawyer, I said. And lawyers cost thousands. We don't have thousands. What if we talk to them? What if we show them the financial spreadsheets we found? If we can prove he moved the money into the trust after she was already sick, maybe it looks like he took advantage of her. He has the trust documents from years ago, Emily. He had the power of attorney. It is all ironclad. We would lose. Then why did they call? She asked. To give us one last chance to humiliate ourselves, I said. The bitterness tasting like bile. They know we have nothing to fight with. They are inviting us to watch him sign the last of our inheritance away to a charity for end-of-life care. I stood up and walked to the window again. The street was darker now, the streetlights flickering to life. I saw a man walking his dog, a woman pushing a stroller, people living their lives, unaware of the two people in a tiny apartment, arguing over the scraps of a fortune that never really belonged to them. "We go to the hearing," I said, turning back to her. "We don't need a lawyer to tell them how we feel. We tell them that this money was intended for the family. We tell them that he manipulated a dying woman." "He has the video, Joshua," Emily reminded me. "If he plays that video in court, we are finished. Everyone will see it. It will be public record." "Then let it be public," I said. "What more can they do to us? We have already been shamed on every social media platform. We have been rejected by the banks. We have nothing left to lose." "I have my dignity," Emily said, though she looked away. "Dignity doesn't pay the rent," I told her. "I am going to the hearing. Whether you come with me or not." "I will come," she said. "I won't let him stand there alone and act like he is the hero of this story." I nodded. I felt a strange, cold clarity settling over me. We had been playing by their rules for too long, pretending we were part of a legacy that had actually been closed off to us years ago. "I need to find those old emails," I said, moving toward the laptop. "The ones from 4 years ago, when Mom sent us the money for the renovations. If I can show they were intended as an investment in the family home, maybe it changes the narrative about the support being a gift." "That is a stretch, Josh," Emily said, though she followed me to the laptop. "But look, here is the folder. Look at the dates." We spent the next several hours buried in the digital wreckage of our past. Emails about house repairs, checks we had cashed, messages where Mom told us to buy new furniture to make the place look better for the guests. We printed everything, every receipt, every bank confirmation, every scrap of proof that we were not just taking money, but maintaining a home that our parents had encouraged us to treat as our own. "It is not a legal case," I muttered as I finished the final page. "But it is a story. It is a story about how they told us one thing while planning another." "It is a start," Emily said, her voice softer than it had been all day. "It is all we have." We didn't sleep that night. We sat in the dim light of the kitchen, the pile of papers growing taller on the table, a paper monument to our own mistakes and our parents' contradictions. When the first gray light of dawn touched the window, I felt exhausted, yet strangely energized. We had a plan, even if it was a desperate one. We had a target, even if it was our own father. The bus rattled past our building, the sound muffled by the thin glass. I thought about the house. I wondered if the new family had painted over the walls in the living room, if they had taken down the hooks where Mom used to hang her hats. I wondered if they knew that the house was built on a foundation of shifting expectations, of promises that had eroded long before the sale was ever signed. "Do you remember the garden?" Emily asked, suddenly. She was looking at the stack of photos we had unearthed from a cloud folder. "The rose bushes Mom planted that first spring. I remember they were thorns," I said. "I remember getting my hands cut every time I tried to help." "She loved them," Emily said. "She used to say that some things only grow if you are willing to get hurt by them." "She should have told us that," I said, a grim smile touching my lips. "She should have told us that before she gave us the house." "Maybe she did," Emily whispered, looking at a photo of herself as a teenager standing in that garden. "Maybe we just weren't listening." I closed the laptop and stood up. The silence of the apartment felt different now. It was no longer the silence of surrender, but the silence of waiting. Monday was coming, and with it, the chance to stand in a courtroom and finally, for once, be heard. "Get some coffee," I told her. "We have a hearing to attend." She nodded, her eyes steady. The resentment was still there, a hard knot in my chest, but alongside it was a flickered light of defiance. We were going to show them that we were not just the ungrateful heirs they wanted us to be. We were the people they had created, and we were coming to collect the last bit of truth we could find in the ashes of our family. I watched her walk to the stove, her movements more certain than they had been hours ago. We were alone, broke, and shamed. But for the first time in years, we were standing on our own feet. I looked at the pile of papers, the evidence of a life that had finally slipped through our fingers, and I felt a strange, cold peace. We would go to the hearing, we would present our story, and then, whatever happened, we would walk out the doors and leave them behind. We would not be their burden anymore. We would be our own disaster, our own success, or our own failure, but it would be ours. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes, waiting for the morning to finish its slow, gray work. The sharp ring of the doorbell cut through the quiet morning, and Emily flinched. I stood beside her, hand resting on the doorframe, feeling the old wood beneath my palm. Emily asked, voice tight. I looked through the peephole and saw a young couple holding a small box. It looks like the new owners, I said, stepping back to let them in. The woman smiled, eyes bright. Hello, Mr. Harrington. We just bought the house and wanted to return a few things we found in the attic. She held out a box tied with twine. I took it, feeling the weight of old papers and a child's drawing. Thank you, I said, my voice calm. Please come in. They stepped inside, glancing at the empty rooms. The man glanced at the staircase. Your wife had a lovely garden, he remarked. I nodded, memories rising like soft dust. She loved roses. The woman laughed softly. They are still blooming. The spoken words hung in the air, simple and true. I turned to Emily and Joshua, who had been watching from the hallway. Their faces were tight, eyes darting. You both have something to say, I said, keeping my tone even. Joshua stepped forward, jaw set. Dad, we need to talk about the storage bill. We can't pay it. His voice held a mix of fear and anger. I folded my hands, feeling the smooth wood of the table nearby. I have already sent the final letter, I replied. All support ends today. The storage fees are yours to manage. Emily's hands clenched at her sides. You can't just cut us off like that, she exclaimed. Her tone rose, but I kept mine low. Your mother wished for me to live free, I said. She left clear wishes. I am following them. Joshua stared at the floor. We thought the house was ours. We thought we had a right. I felt a pang but did not let it show. The house was never yours. It was ours. And now, it belongs to those who will care for it. A silence settled, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Emily's eyes flickered to the box in my hands. What's inside? She asked, curiosity cutting through anger. I opened the lid slightly, revealing a faded photograph of a young Margaret holding a baby Joshua. Memories, I answered. Things that belong to the past. Joshua's voice dropped. We need a place to stay. We have no money. I considered his words, then spoke. You have each other. You have the storage unit. You can sell what you do not need. Emily shook her head. That's not fair. I replied, fairness is not a promise. It is a choice we make each day. The woman from the new family stepped closer, offering a smile. If you need any help moving things, just let us know. I thanked her, feeling a strange warmth. The man nodded, his gaze kind. I turned back to my children. This is the end of our old arrangement, I said. From now on, you will rely on your own efforts. Joshua's shoulders slumped. We will try, he muttered. Emily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. We will try. I felt a quiet relief settle in my chest. Not joy, but a sense of closure. The doorbell rang again, sharp and clear. I looked toward the door and saw a delivery person holding a large envelope marked with a law firm's seal. Excuse me, I said, stepping forward. The delivery person handed me the envelope. Certified mail for Mr. Harrington. I took it, feeling the weight of official paper. I broke the seal, and read the words inside. The letter confirmed that the trust fund for end-of-life care had been funded and was active. A small smile touched my lips. I looked at Emily and Joshua, who stared at the envelope as if it might explode. "This is what Mother wanted," I said softly. "A legacy of care, not of conflict." The delivery person nodded and stepped back. The doorbell chimed once more, a final note that echoed in the empty hallway. I stood there, the envelope still warm in my hand, and felt the quiet settle like dust on the shelves. I walked to the kitchen, poured water into the old kettle, and watched it whistle while I traced the edge of the photograph with my thumb. The roses outside had dropped their petals onto the path, and I swept them into a basket, not to discard but to press between the pages of the journal Mother kept. Each night I wrote a line, not to accuse or justify, but to remember the moments when love was simple and unburdened. When the journal filled, I left it on the bench by the garden gate, where passers-by could take a page if they wished. One evening a young woman stopped, her eyes red from crying, and asked if she could read a line. I handed her the page, and she whispered "thank you" before walking away. In that exchange I realized that healing is not a solitary act. It is a thread we offer, and sometimes receive. If you have ever carried a secret that felt like a stone, you know that setting it down can lighten the load for someone else as well. You see, the simple act of laying down a painful memory does not erase it. It transforms the weight into something that can be held by another heart. When you let a secret slip from your grip and place it where someone else might find it, you teach both yourself and the stranger that sorrow shared becomes sorrow softened, not solved, but made bearable. The journal on the bench became a quiet invitation, each page a hand reaching across time saying, "I have been here, I have felt this, and I am still standing." From that exchange you learn that healing grows in the soil of vulnerability, not in the isolation of silence. It asks you to notice the small gestures, a swept petal basket, a whispered thank you that stitch strangers together without fanfare. So, when you feel the stone of a hidden hurt pressing against your chest, consider where you might set it down, not to forget it, but to offer it as a stepping stone for another traveler. What secret have you carried that, if placed gently in a public place, could become a quiet bridge for someone else's healing? Reflect on that, and let the answer guide your next small act of kindness.